Some secrets were never meant to be found. Ancient cities buried beneath sand, treasures lost for centuries, skeletons that shouldn't exist, artifacts that defy history, and whispers from the past that refuse to stay silent. Tonight, we'll journey through astonishing discoveries, places, people, and objects that make the impossible feel real. From Egypt to China, Peru to South Africa, every chapter uncovers a truth stranger than fiction. If you love unraveling the unknown, stay with us. They say if you subscribe and watch till the end, 7 years of luck will follow you. The honeycombed skull of Otranto. There's a cathedral in southern Italy where the walls don't just speak, they watch. Walk into the grand cathedral of Otranto, and before you even notice the stained glass or the marble, you'll feel it. Hundreds of hollow eyes fixed upon you. The walls are lined with skulls, real ones. These skulls belong to the 813 martyrs of Otranto, ordinary men, who in the year 1480, stood against an empire. When the Ottoman forces invaded their small coastal town, they demanded that every man convert to Islam or die. The people refused, and they paid for it with their lives. Their bodies were gathered and brought here, to the cathedral, where they were placed behind glass as relics of faith and defiance. Each skull tells its own story of courage, but among them all, one stands out, one that has puzzled historians, scientists, and even priests for centuries. It's known as the honeycombed skull. At first glance it looks like any other, but look closer, and you'll see something deeply unnatural. The top of the skull is pierced by 16 perfectly round holes, clean, symmetrical, almost artistic, not from a blade or a bullet, not from decay. For generations no one knew what to make of it. Some locals whispered that the skull belonged to a cursed martyr, a man whose soul had been marked by the devil himself. Others said demons had eaten through the bone, leaving the skull hollow like a hive. Pilgrims would kneel before it, convinced it carried divine power, but no one could explain it, not truly. Centuries later, in 2015, researchers from the University of Pisa decided to look closer. They used micro-CT scans and digital imaging to study the skull in ways no one ever had before. They expected to find damage, erosion, maybe insect activity. Instead, they found something far more deliberate and far more chilling. The holes were made by hand, each one carefully drilled, smooth along the edges, identical in size. Whoever did this, did it with precision. The scientists realized they were looking at trepanation, an ancient and astonishingly old medical practice, where people drilled or scraped holes into the skull. Some cultures did it to release evil spirits, others to treat migraines, epilepsy, or madness. There are examples of trepan skulls going back thousands of years from Peru to ancient Greece to Africa. But this one was different, because these holes weren't made to heal the living, they were made after death. So why? The answer lies in a strange forgotten chapter of medieval medicine, a belief that bone dust could heal. In the Middle Ages, physicians and alchemists believed that scraping or grinding human bone into fine powder created a powerful medicine. It was said to cure seizures, paralysis, even stroke, and the most valuable bone dust of all came from the bones of martyrs, the holy dead. People believed that the energy of a violent, faithful death infused the body with spiritual power. By consuming the dust, you weren't just healing yourself, you were taking in the courage and sanctity of the one who died. So imagine this. After the massacre, perhaps years later, a monk or a physician approached this very skull. He knew whose head it was, one of the martyrs, one of the defiant souls who refused to bow. He set it down, and with a small hand drill, he began to carve circular holes into the crown. From each opening, he collected the fine bone powder. Grain by grain, he gathered it into a vial, to mix with oil or wine, a remedy born of devotion and death. In that time, this wouldn't have been seen as desecration. It would have been an act of faith. To take healing from a holy man's remains was to borrow strength from the sacred. But think about the irony. The very skull of a man who died for his faith, being drilled into and consumed in the name of faith again. Life feeding on death, faith feeding on suffering. The University of Pisa's findings confirmed that the skull's holes were consistent with post-mortem trepanation. That means the drilling happened long after the man's death. And since there's no evidence of healing around the edges, it couldn't have been surgical. Still, not everyone agrees on the bone dust theory. Some historians believe the holes might have had a more ceremonial purpose, not medical, but spiritual. During the late Middle Ages, the veneration of relics was a major part of Christian life. The bones of saints and martyrs were prized possessions, often decorated with gold, jewels, or glass. The holes in the skull may have been drilled to mount it inside a reliquary wall, or to hold metal rods that displayed it more prominently. Others think they may have allowed oil or incense to pass through during ceremonies, symbolically blessing the relic from within. Either way, what's clear is that the skull was treated with care. Whoever worked on it believed it was sacred, but even sacred things change meaning with time. Today, when visitors step inside Otranto Cathedral, they don't see medicine or relics, they see mortality. The skulls are displayed in vast glass cases along the chapel walls, layer upon layer of pale bone, staring silently outward. The air is thick with the scent of wax and stone. There's a heaviness there, not of fear, but of memory. Stand long enough, and you start to wonder, What were their names? What did they look like when they lived? Did they have families? Did they know that their faces would one day stare out from a cathedral wall for half a millennium? The honeycombed skull sits among them, silent, pocked, almost decorative. To the untrained eye, it's just another skull. But to those who know its story, it's something else entirely, a relic of science and superstition intertwined, a reminder that human beings, no matter the era, have always tried to find meaning in death. In the 15th century, bone dust could heal the body. In the 21st, bone dust tells us how we once thought, how we once feared, how we once believed. The honeycombed skull is a mirror of humanity's strangest instincts. The Puquios of Peru and Chile. In one of the driest places on Earth, there are spirals in the sand. They twist down into the desert floor, perfect coils of stone, swirling like stairways to the underworld. From above they look almost alien, like a message carved for something watching from the sky. These are the Puquios, and for centuries no one knew what they were. They lie scattered across the Atacama Desert of South America, one of the most barren, inhospitable landscapes on the planet. The Atacama is so dry that some parts haven't seen a drop of rain in centuries. The ground is cracked, sun-bleached, silent. Yet here, carved into this lifeless earth, are hundreds of these strange spiraling pits, each one carefully built, lined with smooth stones, descending deep into the ground in a perfect corkscrew. The first outsiders to really notice them were explorers and scholars in the early 20th century. When they came across the Puquios, they were baffled. Who would build such things in a place where nothing grows and no rivers flow? And more importantly, why? Some believed they were ceremonial, giant earthworks dedicated to the gods. Others thought they were astronomical markers, a way to track the stars or the seasons. But no one could quite explain how something so precise could exist in a place so empty. For decades, the mystery of the Puquios remained unsolved. To the locals, though, they were nothing new. The descendants of the Nazca people, the same civilization that created the famous Nazca lines, had always known of them. The Nazca were an ancient culture that flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE. They lived where the desert meets the Andes, a place where survival required genius. They were farmers in a land that offered no water, and yet somehow, they thrived. Their crops grew, their cities flourished, and all the while the secret lay beneath their feet. The truth about the Puquios would begin to unfold only in the 21st century. A team of Italian researchers decided to study them, not from the ground but from space. Using satellite images and advanced mapping technology, they began to trace the patterns of the spirals, following where they seemed to lead. What they discovered was astonishing. The Puquios were not random. They were part of an enormous hydraulic network, a complex system of underground channels and tunnels designed to capture and move water. Beneath the dry surface of the Atacama runs a series of natural aquifers, pockets of groundwater hidden deep in the earth. The Nazca had found a way to reach them. The spirals, the Puquios, were ventilation shafts, carved by hand to access and maintain these subterranean canals. The air currents created by the spiral design would draw oxygen into the tunnels, allowing water to flow smoothly through the system, sometimes for miles. It was an ingenious design, perfectly adapted to one of the harshest climates on Earth. To the untrained eye, they look like art, but to the Nazca, they were survival. Imagine what that must have taken. Generations of laborers digging through rock and sand, building perfect spirals by hand, without modern tools or machinery. They didn't just dig a hole. They engineered a climate-controlled water system that worked for centuries. A system that, even today, still functions in parts of southern Peru. This was not a civilization clinging to life. It was one that mastered it. But the Puquios weren't just practical. They were beautiful. Each spiral was lined with stone, shaped in a way that mirrored the symmetry found in nature. Seashells, whirlpools, galaxies. It's as if the builders saw patterns in the universe itself and decided to bring them down into the earth. In their hands, water became sacred. The spirals became symbols of life and of the cycle that connects earth, air, and water. Even now, local farmers still use the ancient aqueducts. The water that flows through them feeds fields of cotton, maize, and beans, crops grown by the same people whose ancestors first carved those spirals thousands of years ago. The sound of running water in the desert is rare, almost magical, and for the Nazca it must have been divine. Archaeologists believe the Puquios were part of a larger spiritual worldview, one where engineering and religion were not separate. To bring water from the depths of the earth was to communicate with Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Each spiral may have represented a prayer, not just for water but for balance between the people and the land. This makes sense when you consider the Nazca lines, those massive geoglyphs etched into the desert nearby. Together, the lines in the Puquios may have formed a kind of sacred landscape, one visible from both above and below. Where the lines called to the gods in the sky, the Puquios reached down to the spirits beneath the ground. It's an idea that turns everything we think we know about primitive civilizations upside down. These people weren't just farmers with faith. They were scientists, architects, and engineers guided by belief. In recent years, scientists have used drones and ground-penetrating radar to map the full extent of the Puquios network. Some tunnels stretch for miles, connecting valleys, communities, and farmlands, and the system is so well designed that it still moves water efficiently today, more than 1500 years after it was built. Even modern hydrologists have admitted they couldn't have done it better without machinery, but there's still something deeply mysterious about them. For all the research, we still don't know how the Nazca located the underground water sources in the first place. How did they know exactly where to dig? How did they calculate the angle, the air pressure, the slope? Even with our modern equipment, tracing aquifers beneath a desert isn't easy. It's as if they had a kind of ancient intuition, a deep, almost spiritual understanding of the land, something we've since forgotten. Stand near one of the pukyos today, and you can feel that ancient intelligence in the air. The spirals descend in perfect harmony, the stones cool to the touch, the wind whispering softly through the channel. If you lean close, you can sometimes hear the faint echo of moving water below, a river hidden under an ocean of the ancient comb writing. Sometimes the smallest discoveries whisper the loudest truths, not a golden statue, not a buried temple, just a comb. In 2017, deep beneath the ancient soil of Lachish, Israel, archaeologists brushed away grains of sand to reveal a small ivory comb. It was fragile, simple, and at first glance completely ordinary, just another tool of daily life from thousands of years ago. For years it sat quietly among other artifacts, catalogued, stored, and almost forgotten, until 2022, when something remarkable happened. Researchers took a closer look. Under better lighting and magnification, they noticed faint markings, so shallow, so delicate, they had escaped every earlier inspection. These weren't random scratches, they were letters, words, sentences carved by human hands nearly 3,700 years ago. The scientists held their breath. What could it say? Was it a royal message, a prayer to a god, a charm of protection or power? When the translation finally came through, everyone in the lab fell silent. It read, "May this tusk root out the lice of the hair and the beard." That was it. No prophecy, no poetry, just a complaint from someone who clearly had had enough of lice. And yet, that simple sentence turned out to be revolutionary, because those faint words represent one of the earliest examples of alphabetic writing ever found. Not hieroglyphs, not pictograms, but actual alphabetic letters, the foundation of the system we still use today. It's proof that by 1700 BCE, people weren't just using symbols for kings and gods, they were using written language for daily life, for personal frustration, for the little annoyances that make us all human. Think about it, this ancient person living nearly 4,000 years ago, sat down with an ivory comb, and took the time to carve a message. They might have been a craftsman, a merchant, a parent combing their child's hair. Whoever they were, they had a problem, lice, and they turned to words for help. May this tusk root out the lice of the hair and the beard. It's half wish, half spell. Maybe they believed the act of carving the words would give the comb power, that language itself held magic. Or maybe they were just making a joke, the Bronze Age version of writing "Bad Hair Day" on your mirror. But to modern researchers, this tiny inscription was like opening a time capsule. Because until then, we didn't have direct evidence that people were using written language in such a simple, domestic way so early. Before this comb, writing was something sacred, reserved for rulers, priests, or scribes on temple walls and clay tablets. It wasn't meant for everyday life. It wasn't personal. This comb changed that. It told us that the invention of the alphabet wasn't about power, it was about communication, the need to express even the smallest things. The letters on the comb are written in an ancient form of Proto-Canaanite, one of the earliest Semitic alphabets. It's the ancestor of Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, and even our modern English alphabet. Those scratches, once invisible, are part of your language, right now thousands of years later. Imagine the moment the writer carved those symbols, a quiet evening, the glow of a fire. Maybe they'd just returned from tending goats or trading in the marketplace. They take this smooth ivory comb, likely made from an imported elephant tusk, a luxury item, and etch their wish into it. Each line, each curve deliberate, and centuries later, buried under layers of dust, it waited until a team of archaeologists brushed it back into the light, and the voice of that long-forgotten person spoke again. But it's not just the words that matter, it's the context. The comb itself tells its own story. One side of the comb had wide teeth, for untangling hair. The other had fine teeth, perfect for removing lice. And under a microscope, scientists actually found remnants of lice still clinging between the teeth. Even after nearly 4,000 years, the evidence was there. The inscription wasn't a joke, it was literal. Someone was genuinely battling lice, a problem so common, so irritating, that they wished the comb could magically make it stop. It's strangely comforting, isn't it? Across time, technology, and civilization, we're still just people trying to make our lives a little easier. This discovery didn't just rewrite history, it humanized it. We often imagine the ancient world as full of kings and warriors, temples and treasures. But in reality, it was full of ordinary people, tired, stressed, and occasionally itchy, using the same mix of humor, belief, and hope we still rely on today. Professor Yosef Garfinkel of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem called it a landmark discovery because it's not grand, it's personal. He said, "This is direct evidence for the use of the alphabet in daily activities some 3,700 years ago. That's why it matters. Because through this small act, carving a few words into a comb, humanity took one more step toward what makes us truly unique, language that speaks from one heart to another." The alphabet began as a way to simplify, to take the complex hieroglyphs of Egypt and strip them down into sounds anyone could write, anyone could read. It was democratized communication, the beginning of human storytelling as we know it. And this comb proves that by the 2nd millennium BCE, that idea had already spread, not among elites, but among everyday people. So yes, the message might sound mundane, but it's actually profound, because it's real, it's honest, it's human. When you think about it, that person who carved the words isn't so different from us. We still scribble our thoughts on things, notes on mirrors, names on tools, graffiti on walls. We still leave messages behind, hoping someone someday might understand us. And that's what archaeology is all about. Uncovering those messages, not from kings or conquerors, but from the ordinary souls who made history without even knowing it. That's the beauty of this comb. It's not just a relic, it's a voice, a whisper from nearly 4 millennia ago saying, "I was here, I felt, I thought, I hoped." And even though the words were simple, just a wish to get rid of lice, they remind us that the first purpose of writing wasn't glory or record keeping, it was connection. When the researchers finally held it under the microscope, they realized they weren't just studying an object. They were reading the very beginning of human expression, a message small enough to fit on a comb, yet powerful enough to travel through time. And maybe that's why this discovery hits differently, because it isn't about kings or empires, it's about a single human moment, frozen in time, reminding us that even the simplest wish, even a complaint, can become immortal once written down. 4,000 years later, that simple comb and its humble message still speak, not about lice, but about language, about humanity, about us. The pyramid ramps. For thousands of years, the great pyramids of Egypt have stood silent, defiant against time itself. They pierce the horizon of Giza, rising from the desert like colossal ghosts of another world, built by hand, stone by stone, in an age before machines or steel. How? That question has haunted historians, scientists, and dreamers alike for centuries. How did ancient builders, with nothing but copper tools and rope, construct monuments so perfect that even today, engineers still marvel at their precision? At the heart of this mystery lies one word: ramps. For decades the idea has lingered. Maybe the Egyptians used ramp systems to drag the massive limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, up the sides of the pyramid. Simple enough to imagine, but the truth, as always, runs deeper. Because the pyramids weren't built overnight, they were the product of vision, mathematics, and unimaginable human effort. Under the burning Egyptian sun, thousands of workers moved stone after stone, creating what would become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But until recently, the question of how remained unanswered. Then in 2018, everything changed. A team of archaeologists in the desert near Hatnub, an ancient alabaster quarry east of the Nile, uncovered something extraordinary, a ramp system. Not just any ramp. It dated to the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, the same ruler who commissioned the Great Pyramid of Giza around 2570 BC. This ramp wasn't a guess, it was real. Carved into the bedrock were long corridors flanked by staircases, with deep post holes on either side, a sophisticated setup that allowed workers to haul heavy stone blocks upward using ropes and sleds. It was the closest thing anyone had ever found to physical proof of the pyramid construction technique. The discovery sent ripples across the world of archaeology. For centuries, people imagined enormous straight ramps stretching out from the pyramid, massive constructions of sand and mud brick. But this posed a problem. Such ramps would have required more material than the pyramid itself, and there was no evidence left behind of anything that large. The Hatnub find, however, told a different story. This ramp system wasn't linear. It was angled upward through the quarry itself, with staircases on both sides, and strategically placed posts that allowed workers to pull stone with ropes, up steep inclines that, until then, scientists believed impossible for that era. So what if the Egyptians didn't use one massive ramp, but a series of internal or spiral ramps? What if the pyramids grew from the inside out, their rampways concealed within their own rising walls? Suddenly the impossible began to make sense. Picture it, a blistering desert day, nearly 4,500 years ago. Hundreds of workers line the slope of a massive ramp. The air is thick with dust. At the top, a foreman shouts orders in a language older than time itself. Below, men strain against ropes, dragging a multi-ton block inch by inch upward, chanting in rhythm to keep their pace. The sound of stone grinding against wood, the smell of sweat and sun-baked sand. This was no magic, no alien technology. It was pure human will. Every inch of that pyramid tells a story of organization and engineering genius. Scholars now believe the Egyptians used a mix of techniques: straight ramps for the lower levels, zigzagging ramps for the middle, and internal ramps for the upper tiers. They adapted, innovated, and refined as the structure rose higher and higher toward the heavens. But why go to such extremes? Why pour so much effort into something that would outlast even memory itself? For the Egyptians, the pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a stairway to eternity, a bridge between the earth and the afterlife, built to carry Pharaoh's soul into the realm of the gods. Khufu's Great Pyramid, the largest of them all, was his promise of immortality. And the workers who built it weren't slaves as once believed. Evidence now suggests they were skilled laborers, well-fed and honored for their role in this sacred task. They lived in organized communities near the site, working in teams that rotated seasonally. Each block they moved was part of something divine. Each pull of the rope was an offering to eternity. And that ramp, that simple, ingenious piece of engineering, was their secret weapon. The 2018 discovery revealed grooves carved into the bedrock and symmetrical holes for wooden posts. By threading ropes through these posts, workers could multiply their pulling power, creating a kind of ancient pulley system. This meant they could haul multi-ton blocks up slopes far steeper than previously believed, even up to 20% inclines. It was a revelation. For years, modern engineers had underestimated the Egyptians. They assumed that without advanced tools, steep inclines were impossible. But the Hatnub ramp proved otherwise. It showed that human intelligence, when driven by faith and purpose, could overcome almost anything. And the more we uncover, the clearer it becomes. The pyramids weren't miracles. They were masterpieces of planning, teamwork, and mathematics. The alignment of the Great Pyramid, for example, is so precise that it faces true north within a fraction of a degree, something modern builders struggle to achieve without digital instruments. Its base covers 13 acres, and the stones fit together so tightly that not even a sheet of paper can slip between them. All of that built using ramps, sleds, and muscle. It's humbling to think about. When we gaze at the pyramids today, we're not just looking at ancient architecture. We're looking at a blueprint of the human spirit, a monument to what can happen when thousands unite under one vision. And maybe that's what makes the ramp discovery so important, because it strips away the fantasy, the alien theories, the myths, and replaces them with something far more powerful: the truth. The truth that ordinary people, with nothing but determination and ingenuity, built the most extraordinary structures on Earth. The ramps may have vanished, eroded by time, but their legacy remains in every block, every angle, every perfect alignment of Khufu's masterpiece. It reminds us that history isn't made by magic. It's made by people, sweating under the sun, pulling with all their might, carving their purpose. The underground city of Madiate. Beneath the ancient streets of Turkey's Midyat, under homes, markets, and stone walls that have stood for centuries, lies a hidden world. A world carved by human hands, whispered about in the shadows, and only recently rediscovered after thousands of years of silence. They call it Madiate, an underground city so vast that archaeologists believe it may be the largest cave system in the world. And it wasn't built for beauty or wealth. It was built for survival. The story begins in 2020. A group of construction workers were renovating houses in the historic district of Midyat in southeastern Turkey. The job was simple: restore, repair, rebuild. But as their tools struck the ancient limestone, the floor gave way, revealing a dark, narrow passageway beneath the city. At first they thought it was just another cellar, like the many that lie under old Turkish homes. But as they pressed further, the tunnel opened into a series of chambers, twisting corridors, stairways leading downward, and hollow spaces carved into solid rock. They had stumbled upon something vast, something that stretched far beyond the basements and foundations of the town above. When archaeologists arrived to investigate, they soon realized what they were looking at was no ordinary discovery. They had unearthed an entire underground world. Room after room opened up, carved walls blackened by smoke, wells that once drew water from deep underground, stone-lined ventilation shafts, and even remnants of daily life: coins, pottery, human bones, oil lamps, all signs that thousands of years ago people lived down here, not for a few nights, not even a few months, but for generations. The name they gave it was Matiate, an ancient name meaning city of caves, a city not built upon the earth but beneath it. To understand why, we need to go back nearly 2,000 years, to a time when the Roman Empire ruled vast territories, stretching across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Back then, the region of Midyat, known as Tur Abdin, was home to an early Christian community. These were people who lived in constant fear of persecution. The Roman Empire, while vast and powerful, was not kind to those who refused to worship its gods or acknowledge its emperor as divine. Christians were hunted, imprisoned, and executed for their beliefs. and so they went underground. Literally, in places like Matiete, believers found refuge in the shadows, carving out chambers to live, worship and survive away from the eyes of their oppressors. Archaeologists now believe that Matiete was used as a sanctuary between the 1st and 6th century CE. Imagine it, entire families descending into the earth, carrying whatever they could, food, tools, water, candles, to hide from soldiers above. The air would have been thick and still, the tunnels narrow, twisting and suffocatingly dark, but it was safe. Down there the persecuted found peace. For centuries this underground world was their home. They built kitchens, storage rooms, stables for animals, and vast gathering spaces that may have served as underground churches. Some tunnels connected to wells, providing fresh water, others linked to secret exits, allowing escape to distant parts of the town or countryside. It wasn't just a hiding place, it was a city beneath a city. Excavation director Gani Tarkan believes the underground network could stretch for over 100,000 square feet, possibly even more. That's miles of tunnels, carved entirely by hand, through dense limestone, and every inch tells a story. The coins found within tell us that trade and economy still thrived, even underground. The bones, fragile reminders of life, show that these people didn't just hide here temporarily. They lived and died in the darkness, and the architectural layout proves remarkable planning. They built ventilation systems that allowed air to flow even dozens of meters below ground. They created food storage areas where the temperature remained cool and stable year-round. They carved out altars, niches for candles, and walls decorated with simple engravings of faith, all of it done in secret, in silence, to preserve life. For centuries Matiete remained hidden, buried by time and forgotten by history, but that silence ended with a single strike of a construction tool in 2020. When the team from the Mardin Museum descended into the tunnels, they realized the scale of what they had found was almost beyond comprehension. It rivaled other underground cities like Derinkuyu and Kaimakli in Cappadocia, but Matiete was far older and possibly much larger. Some of the passages remain unexplored even now. The archaeologists can only go so far before the air grows too thin or the walls too unstable. Every step deeper feels like a descent into another era, a place where light has not touched for nearly 2 millennia, and yet the deeper they go, the clearer the picture becomes. This was a place of human endurance, a place of faith, fear, and hope. The people who lived in Matiete didn't just hide, they adapted. They transformed stone into shelter, darkness into safety, and somehow in the heart of the earth, they built a community. It's hard to imagine what it must have felt like to live there. The constant chill of the stone underfoot, the faint flicker of an oil lamp casting shadows on carved walls, the muffled sounds of the world above that could never quite reach you. But for those early Christians, the underground world was sacred. Here they could pray without fear, they could raise their children, share meals, and hold on to their beliefs when the surface world turned against them. Over time, as the Roman Empire began to change, and Christianity eventually became accepted, the need for such hidden sanctuaries faded. The tunnels were sealed, forgotten, and later used for more ordinary purposes, like wine cellars and storage chambers. And so the great city of Matiete fell silent once more, until the workers broke through the rock in 2020, and the ghosts of that underground civilization returned to the light. It's strange to think how fragile history can be, how easily whole cities can disappear under our feet. We build, we forget, we move on, but the past is always there, just waiting for someone to dig deep enough to find it again. Today, archaeologists continue to explore Matiete, but they've only uncovered a fraction of its full size. It could stretch far beyond what we can see, possibly linking to other hidden chambers and passageways under Matiete. Some speculate that Matiete might have been part of an entire network of underground cities, connected across ancient Mesopotamia and Anatolia. If the secret of Roman concrete, all across Europe, the remains of an empire still stand. Walk through Rome today, and you'll see them everywhere. Colossal aqueducts, stretching across valleys, temples and amphitheaters, older than entire nations, and harbor walls that have stood firm for 2,000 years against relentless tides. They are quite literally the bones of history. And yet there's one question that has haunted modern engineers for centuries. How? How are they still standing? Because let's face it, modern concrete, for all our technology and precision, can crack and crumble in just a few decades. Bridges need repairs, buildings decay, roads deteriorate. But Roman structures, they seem to defy time itself. The answer, it turns out, lies not just in stone or mortar, but in a recipe. A recipe so brilliant that it gave Roman concrete something scientists today are only beginning to understand: the ability to heal itself. To understand this mystery, we need to go back in time, to the days when Rome was not just a city, but a superpower. Imagine standing in the heart of ancient Rome, around 100 BC. The air is filled with the clang of hammers, the rumble of carts, the shouting of laborers hauling stones. The empire is expanding faster than ever before, across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. To build such an empire, the Romans needed something that could last, something stronger than stone, more adaptable than brick, and durable enough to stand against centuries of weather, war, and wear. And so they created it. Opus cementissimo, what we now call Roman concrete. At first glance it might seem simple: crushed stone, volcanic ash, lime, and water. But it was the way they combined these materials, and the chemistry that followed, that changed everything. The secret ingredient was pozzolana, a volcanic ash found around the Bay of Naples near Mount Vesuvius. When mixed with lime, that's burned limestone and water, it didn't just harden like normal cement. It became something alive, something that could react with its environment, especially with water, and grow stronger over time. The Romans didn't know it in modern chemical terms, but they observed it. They saw that their harbor walls built underwater weren't crumbling. In fact, the longer they stood, the harder they became. That was unheard of. To the Romans it must have felt like a gift from the gods, a kind of divine stone that strengthened itself against nature. To us, it's pure chemistry, but no less magical. Here's what happens. When cracks form in Roman concrete, through stress, age, or weather, water seeps in. Inside, tiny particles of unreacted lime are waiting. When the water reaches them, it triggers a new chemical reaction that produces calcium carbonate crystals. Those crystals grow and fill the cracks, literally sealing the damage. The concrete heals itself. Think about that. A wall that can repair its own wounds. A harbor that can endure centuries of waves. A structure that grows stronger with age, not weaker. Modern scientists call it autogenous healing, but to the Romans, it was just good engineering. They didn't stumble upon this by accident either. Roman builders experimented constantly, blending different ashes, stones, and limes from various regions. They learned that the volcanic materials near Naples produced the most durable results. They used it everywhere, from the Colosseum to aqueducts to the Great Dome of the Pantheon, which even after 2 millennia still stands as the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Now let's pause for a moment and really think about that. The Pantheon, built around 125 AD, a dome made entirely of Roman concrete, stretching 142 feet across. No steel, no rebar, no modern reinforcement, and it's still standing, perfectly balanced to this very day. That's not just engineering, that's genius. For centuries though, the secret behind Roman concrete was lost. As the empire declined and Europe entered the Middle Ages, much of that ancient knowledge disappeared. Later builders tried to replicate it, but the results were never quite the same. When modern Portland cement was invented in the 19th century, it became the world standard, fast-setting, strong, and easy to produce. But it had one fatal flaw: it was brittle. Once it cracked, it stayed cracked. There was no healing, no reaction, no resilience. By the 20th century, engineers began to notice something strange. Roman structures that had stood for 2,000 years were still solid, while modern ones barely 100 years old were falling apart. So scientists began digging deeper, literally. They took microscopic samples of ancient Roman walls and studied them under powerful instruments, and what they found astonished them. Inside the concrete were tiny white inclusions, fragments of lime that hadn't fully mixed in. For years, researchers thought these were simply flaws, imperfections in ancient craftsmanship. But in 2023, a team from MIT made a discovery that changed everything. Those lime clasts weren't mistakes, they were the secret ingredient. When cracks formed and water entered, the lime dissolved and recrystallized as calcium carbonate, patching the gap. It was a built-in repair system. In other words, the Romans designed their concrete to heal itself. Think about how incredible that is. 2,000 years ago, without microscopes, without chemistry labs, without modern science, Roman builders created a living material. They understood its behavior so well that they could make it repair itself, long before anyone could even explain how. That's not just ancient wisdom, that's innovation centuries ahead of its time. Even today, we struggle to replicate it. Modern researchers are trying to reverse engineer the Roman formula, hoping to create new sustainable materials that mimic its self-healing properties. Imagine roads that never need fixing, bridges that last centuries, and buildings that can outlive civilizations. The Romans had it, and we're only just catching up. And perhaps that's the most humbling part of all this, because it reminds us that progress isn't always a straight line. Sometimes the ancients weren't behind us, they were ahead. When you walk through the ruins of Rome, past arches, temples, and aqueducts that seem eternal, you're not just seeing history, you're seeing a technology so advanced that we still don't fully understand it. Each stone, each column, each wall is a silent testament to the ingenuity of a people who looked at nature, at volcanoes, ash, lime, and water, and saw not chaos, but possibility. They built a material that could resist the sea, endure time, and heal itself when broken. A material born from fire and earth. The mystery of the Lycurgus cup. Imagine this. You're standing in a dimly lit museum hall, surrounded by silence. Ahead of you sits a single glass cup, suspended inside a glass case. At first glance, it looks like any other artifact, a fragile jade-green relic from ancient Rome. But then, you take one step closer, a beam of light shifts across its surface, and suddenly, before your very eyes, the cup transforms. The green vanishes, replaced by a deep glowing crimson, like molten rubies. It feels alive, like the cup itself is breathing light. This isn't just art, it's technology, 1600 years ahead of its time. This is the Lycurgus cup, one of the most baffling and beautiful mysteries the ancient world ever left behind. When the Lycurgus cup was first discovered in the mid-19th century, nobody understood it. To the untrained eye, it looked like an ordinary Roman cage cup, a type of luxury glassware popular among the elite in the 4th century AD. But the way it behaved under light defied everything we knew about glass. How could something so old shift color like that? When light struck the cup from the front, it gleamed a soft greenish jade, but when light passed through it from behind, it became blood red, glowing like fire trapped inside crystal. It was mesmerizing, almost supernatural. For decades, no one could explain it. Not archaeologists, not chemists, not glassmakers. Some whispered that it was witchcraft. Others said it must have been a lost Roman art, a secret method of glassmaking that vanished with time. And honestly, it might as well have been magic, because the truth, when scientists finally discovered it in the late 20th century, was nothing short of astonishing. Let's go back to where it began. The cup itself dates to around 400 AD, during the waning days of the Roman Empire. It's not large, about the size of a small bowl, but its design is breathtaking. It's decorated with an elaborate scene depicting King Lycurgus of Thrace, a figure from Greek mythology. Lycurgus was the man who dared to defy Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. In the story, Lycurgus attacked one of Dionysus's followers, a mistake that would doom him to a violent fate. The god cursed him, driving him to madness, and vines wrapped around his limbs, choking him until he perished. That entire scene, Lycurgus entangled in vines, his rage frozen in glass, is carved into the surface of this cup. It's both beautiful and tragic, a masterpiece of ancient storytelling. But that's not what makes it extraordinary. It's the way it glows. For centuries, people assumed that the cup's color-changing effect came from dyes, or pigments, or some optical trick caused by the glass thickness. But in 1990, when British scientists examined tiny fragments of the cup under an electron microscope, what they found left them speechless. The glass wasn't just colored, it was engineered. Embedded throughout the glass were nanoparticles of gold and silver, each one only 50 nanometers wide. To put that into perspective, that's 1,000th the width of a human hair. The Romans, nearly 1700 years ago, had somehow created a piece of glass infused with metal particles so small that they could manipulate light at the molecular level. This wasn't luck, this was nanotechnology. When light hits the Lycurgus cup, those tiny metallic particles interact with the photons in the light. Different wavelengths scatter in different ways, depending on whether the light shines on or through the glass. That's what creates the shift: jade green in reflected light, and deep red in transmitted light. It's a phenomenon known today as dichroism, and it's incredibly rare in ancient artifacts. Even with modern equipment, recreating it precisely is difficult. So how did the Romans do it? That's the question that still puzzles researchers. They didn't have microscopes. They didn't have chemistry labs, and yet they managed to disperse gold and silver particles evenly throughout molten glass. A process so delicate that even 20th century scientists had trouble reproducing it. It's possible that the craftsmen had no idea of the nanoscience behind their creation. They just knew what worked. Through centuries of experimentation and intuition, they learned that adding trace amounts of metal dust to molten glass could create stunning effects. But here's the thing. The Lycurgus cup is the only surviving Roman glass that does this so perfectly. No other artifact from the era behaves quite like it, which makes it even more mysterious. Some scholars believe the cup was commissioned for a royal family, possibly used during ceremonial feasts dedicated to Dionysus. When lit by torches, the cup would glow red like wine, symbolizing the god's power and blood. Others think it was used in secret religious rituals designed to shock and awe, as the flickering flames turned the vessel into something living, divine. Whatever its purpose, one thing is certain: whoever held that cup witnessed something no one else in the ancient world had ever seen. They were holding light itself, captured and transformed by human hands. The cup's journey through history is just as fascinating. It somehow survived the collapse of the Roman Empire, the chaos of the Middle Ages, and centuries of neglect. It was eventually rediscovered in the 19th century, in near-perfect condition, a miracle, considering how delicate it is. Today it sits in the British Museum, protected behind glass, still capable of dazzling anyone who looks upon it. And here's where things get even more interesting. When scientists tried to recreate the Lycurgus effect, they accidentally stumbled upon the same optical principles used in modern nanotechnology, the very science behind smartphone displays, sensors, and even cancer diagnostics. In other words, this cup didn't just survive history, it predicted the future. The same physical laws that make your phone screen glow, that allow lasers to detect viruses, that power the fiber optics in your internet cables, they all rely on manipulating light at the nanoscale, exactly what the Romans unknowingly achieved nearly 2,000 years ago. Let that sink in. The Lycurgus cup is not just a beautiful artifact, It's evidence of an ancient genius that rivaled our own. But there's another layer to this story, one that's less scientific and more human. Think about the craftsman who made it. A Roman glassworker, probably anonymous, working in a dim workshop somewhere near Alexandria or Rome. He would have melted the sand, the ash, and the precious metals together in a roaring furnace. He'd shaped the glowing mass, maybe not even realizing the full magic of what he was creating. He wasn't trying to change the world. He was just trying to make something beautiful, something that would make people gasp when they saw it in the firelight. And yet that creation, born from art, not science, became one of the earliest examples of nanotechnology on Earth. There's something poetic about that. That beauty and innovation can come from the same place, from the human desire to understand light, to control it, to capture it. It's what connects a Roman glassmaker with a modern physicist. It's what an impossible Egyptian statue. There's a reason ancient Egypt still captivates us after thousands of years. It's not just the pyramids, or the gold, or the mummies, it's the rules. Because in ancient Egypt everything had rules, especially art. How a god could be shown, how a pharaoh could be depicted, how power itself was to be carved into stone. For the Egyptians, art wasn't just decoration, it was law, it was religion, it was reality itself. So when a tiny, unassuming statue was pulled from the sands in the mid-1800s, a single quiet piece of stone no bigger than a loaf of bread, it shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Because this statue broke every single rule, and it left Egyptologists scratching their heads for more than a century and a half. The story begins in the 1850s. A team of Scottish archaeologists was digging near Thebes, ancient Luxor, the heart of Egypt's new kingdom, where kings and queens ruled the mightiest empire of their time. There, among fragments of pottery and crumbled tomb walls, they unearthed a small statue, simple, elegant, but something about it felt off. It showed a pharaoh, unmistakably royal, wearing the tall double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, his expression calm, eternal. But here's the shocking part. He wasn't standing in divine authority. He wasn't seated upon a throne. He was sitting on the lap of another man, a kneeling man. For anyone who knows Egyptian art, that single image is impossible. A pharaoh was the living god on earth. No mortal, not even a priest, not even a royal advisor could ever hold a king like that. It would have been blasphemy carved in stone. And yet, here it was. At first scholars thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe the sculptor was inexperienced. Maybe the head of the pharaoh was reattached to the wrong body after centuries underground. But no, the statue was perfectly intact, carved from one continuous block of stone. The pharaoh's crown aligned flawlessly with his features. The kneeling figure beneath him was deliberate, confident, purposeful. This was not an accident. But then the question became why? Who was this man bold enough to place a pharaoh upon his lap? And what story could possibly justify such heresy? For decades, no one had an answer. The statue was placed in museum archives, labeled as anomaly, studied and restudied, but never understood. Some called it symbolic. Some called it propaganda. Some whispered that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a pharaoh at all. But then, in 2023, new technology came to the rescue. A group of Egyptologists and linguists re-examined the faint hieroglyphs carved into the statue's base, inscriptions so weathered that they'd been thought unreadable since the 19th century. Using high-resolution imaging and 3D laser scanning, they enhanced the carvings letter by letter, symbol by symbol, and finally, the statue spoke. The kneeling figure wasn't a stranger, nor a rebel, nor a deluded artist. His name was Ramos, a man of immense power, a vizier, one of the highest officials in the court of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. He wasn't just a servant. He was a statesman, a confidant, and a friend. The inscription revealed something else. This was not a scene of defiance or equality. It was an act of devotion, a memorial, a visual poem carved in stone. When Amenhotep I died, Ramos had this statue made in his honor. The image of the king sitting on his lap wasn't one of dominance or intimacy. It was grief, a gesture that said, "I will carry my king even in death." Suddenly, the statue's meaning flipped entirely. What had seemed impossible, even heretical, was now heartbreakingly human. This wasn't rebellion, it was loyalty. Imagine it, Ramos the vizier, standing in the flickering torchlight of an ancient temple, overseeing the carving of this tribute. Every stroke of the chisel, every curve of stone, a declaration of eternal service. He couldn't touch the pharaoh in life. He couldn't embrace him in the royal court. But in death, through art, he found a way to hold him close, forever. That's the kind of love and loyalty that defies time itself. But the mystery of this statue runs deeper. You see, in ancient Egypt, the relationship between a pharaoh and his subjects wasn't just political, it was cosmic. The pharaoh wasn't a ruler chosen by people, he was chosen by the gods. His word was law because his voice was divine. So when an artist carved something that contradicted that divine hierarchy, it had to have meaning far beyond the obvious. The fact that Ramos commissioned this piece and it wasn't destroyed, that it survived at all, suggests that even within Egypt's strict order, there was room for emotion, for reverence, and for personal expression. It reminds us that behind the colossal monuments, the golden masks, the endless rows of hieroglyphs were real people people who loved, who mourned, who sought ways to make their grief immortal. And yet this little statue still carries questions that historians can't quite answer. Was Ramos's act approved by the temple priests, or was it a secret commission, hidden away from those who would have seen it as a sacrilege? Some believe it was placed in a private shrine, where only family members or initiates could see it. Others think it might have been buried with Ramosa himself, a personal offering to the afterlife. What's clear is that whoever carved it understood the rules and broke them anyway, with purpose. Over time, the statue became more than an artifact. It became a symbol of the complexity of Egyptian art, of how emotion could bend even divine law. Think about it. We often see Egyptian civilization as rigid, symmetrical, unchanging. Their gods stand straight, their figures walk sideways, their pharaohs look eternal. But this piece, this tiny act of rebellion through tenderness, reminds us that even in a world ruled by gods, humanity always found a way to show through. Maybe that's why it still fascinates us, because beneath the layers of ritual and divinity, it captures something universal, the ache of loss, the longing to hold on to someone who's gone. And in that way, Ramoses, this powerful official who dared to hold his king, wasn't breaking tradition. He was proving that love outlasts it. Today, the impossible statue sits quietly in a museum, behind glass, as tourists pass by without realizing what they're looking at. Just a small worn sculpture, another relic among thousands. But if you stop for a moment, if you really look at it, you can almost see it, the story behind the stone. A man kneeling, carrying the weight of grief. A king gone, but never forgotten. A friendship strong enough to defy eternity. And maybe that's the truest kind of immortality. Not the kind carved in hieroglyphs or written in history books, but the kind born from love, loyalty, and memory. So perhaps this little statue was never impossible after all. Perhaps it was exactly what it was meant to be, a whisper from the past, reminding us that even in the most divine of kingdoms, the most human thing of all was the heart. Mona Lisa's hidden eyebrows. Close your eyes and imagine walking through the quiet, echoing halls of the Louvre Museum in Paris. The air is calm, slightly cool, and still, carrying the faint scent of old wood and polished marble. Footsteps echo softly across the floors as visitors move gently from one masterpiece to another. Everything here feels timeless, as if centuries of history have been folded into the walls themselves. And there, in a softly lit room, she waits, the Mona Lisa. Her gaze is gentle, her lips curved in that quiet, enigmatic smile that has captivated millions. Her presence is subtle yet magnetic. You feel drawn to her, as though she holds some secret she is quietly willing to share, but only if you notice her carefully, if you truly pay attention. Perhaps one of the most enduring mysteries of art, a question that has tickled the minds of scholars and casual observers alike, is this: why doesn't the Mona Lisa have eyebrows? For hundreds of years, people have speculated. Did Leonardo da Vinci simply forget them? Was it a deliberate choice, a Renaissance trend that celebrated bare, smooth foreheads as a sign of beauty and nobility? Or perhaps the eyebrows were always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Time moved slowly, and theories multiplied. People studied her gaze, analyzed her hands, marveled at her flowing robes, and the delicate, almost imperceptible shadows across her face. But the missing eyebrows remained a quiet puzzle, a gentle riddle whispered across centuries. The world outside continued to change. Kings and queens rose and fell, wars reshaped continents, empires crumbled, cities grew, and time flowed onward, like a slow, unrelenting river. And yet the Mona Lisa remained, silent, patient, unchanging, except for the gradual effects of time, and the soft brushstrokes that now carried faint traces of history itself. Imagine Leonardo, carefully at work in his studio, centuries ago. Soft light filters through the tall windows, casting a gentle glow over the room. His brushes glide across the canvas, creating subtle shifts in tone and shadow. Each hair of her brow is painted with meticulous care, each line softly drawn, almost invisible unless one looks closely. The eyelashes, delicate and fine, are placed with painstaking precision. Leonardo's patience is palpable, his concentration total. He is alone with his creation, every movement slow and deliberate, every thought quiet. Over time, the painting traveled through history. It survived the passage of decades and centuries, facing changes in ownership, relocations, and the inevitable shifts caused by temperature, humidity, and the very air it breathed. The gentle passage of time, though invisible in the moment, left its mark. The delicate details of her eyebrows and eyelashes, once carefully rendered, began to fade, almost imperceptibly. In 2007, modern technology offered a quiet revelation. High-resolution scans revealed traces of her missing eyebrows and eyelashes, proof that Leonardo had indeed painted them. They had not vanished by accident, nor had he forgotten them. Instead, they were victims of time, and of the earliest attempts at restoration, subtle details erased by hands that only meant to preserve her. Now, picture this discovery not as a sudden event, but as a gentle unfolding. Imagine historians and scientists, softly moving through dimly lit rooms, analyzing every detail, their magnifying glasses and scanners capturing faint shadows that had endured for centuries. Their excitement is quiet, subdued, but profound. They do not shout. They do not rush. They study. They record. They marvel. And in their careful attention, the Mona Lisa's hidden details are rediscovered, quietly, patiently, like a whisper across the ages. As you visualize her face, you begin to notice the subtle textures of the canvas, the gentle gradations of light and shadow, the delicate nuances of her smile. Each brushstroke tells a story, not only of art, but of human curiosity, of patience, and of the passage of time. The faint trace of her eyebrows is like a secret, a tiny layer of history resting quietly beneath the surface, waiting for those who notice to uncover it. And now, as you imagine her watching you softly from her frame, let your mind drift further. Imagine the quiet corners of her studio, the smell of oils and pigments lingering in the air. Imagine Leonardo's gentle hands moving slowly, deliberately, as he works into the evening light. Outside, the city of Florence sleeps, the streets empty, and the world beyond fades softly into night. Her smile is timeless. Her eyes seem to follow you, but there is no rush in her gaze. Only calm, only quiet. You can feel the centuries folding around her, the history of art and life converging in this single moment of presence. Each detail, each line of paint, carries with it a gentle weight, a soft reminder of patience, of observation, of care. Breathe in slowly. Let your chest rise and fall. Imagine yourself sitting quietly in front of her, taking in the subtle curves of her lips, the gentle shadows of her cheeks, the faint whisper of her lost eyebrows. Feel the calmness of the room, the stillness of the museum, and the quiet patience of history itself. And as your breath slows, imagine the quiet footsteps fading away. The room empties, the light softens, the painting glows gently in the still air, silent yet full of stories. Imagine the quiet footsteps fading away. The room empties, the light softens, the painting glows gently in the still air, silent yet full of stories. The centuries fold around you like a soft blanket, carrying you deeper into calm. Every detail you see, every subtle shadow, every hint of paint, every whisper of history, invites you to relax further. Imagine the soft texture of the canvas beneath Leonardo's brush, the slow blending of pigments, the care in each stroke. Feel the patient passage of time, like a slow river flowing past, soft and unhurried, leaving only quiet ripples in its wake. Her eyes, her smile, her subtle features, they are a lullaby of history. Let them guide you gently into a world of calm. Each breath takes you deeper, each thought becomes slower. The Mona Lisa is there, timeless and serene, watching softly as you drift. Her missing eyebrows, once hidden, are now part of the quiet story you carry in your mind. A reminder that even the smallest, most delicate details can endure, even if unseen. And as you settle, as your eyelids grow heavy, the mysteries of art, time, and history fold around you like a soft, gentle blanket. Let the world fade away. Let your mind soften. Feel the calm, the stillness, the patient passage of centuries. And now, slowly, gently drift into sleep, carried on the quiet, timeless presence of the Mona Lisa. The Atacama Skeleton, Atacama Desert in northern Chile. The land stretches endlessly, a soft palette of pale browns, gentle ochres, and muted grays, as far as the eye can see. The sun hangs low in the sky, bathing the desert in a warm golden glow. The wind moves quietly, rustling the sparse shrubs and leaving patterns across the dry sand. Everything here feels ancient, untouched, timeless. This desert is one of the driest places on Earth, a place where time seems to move more slowly, where secrets can remain hidden for centuries, preserved under layers of dust and silence. And it was here, in 2003, that a small discovery would quietly captivate the world, stirring curiosity, wonder, and even whispers of the unknown. A tiny skeleton, only about 6 inches long, was found half buried in the dry earth. At first glance, it seemed almost otherworldly. Its head was elongated, its rib count unusual, its body delicate and strange. Those who saw it could not help but feel a mixture of awe and bewilderment. The Atacama skeleton seemed to defy the ordinary. It was so small, so fragile, so entirely unlike anything most people had ever seen. Naturally, imagination began to wander. Could this be evidence of something beyond our world? Could it be, as some suggested, an alien being that had somehow found its way to our planet? The desert, vast and silent, seemed to whisper its secrets, and the skeleton appeared as though it had been waiting patiently to be discovered. But for those who study the human body and the history of life on Earth, there is always more to learn, deeper truths hidden beneath the surface. Years passed, and scientists examined the tiny skeleton carefully, slowly, with meticulous attention. Its anomalies were intriguing, its irregularities unique, and yet there was a sense that the answer lay not in speculation, but in careful observation and study. In 2018, after many years of research, DNA analysis finally revealed the truth. The skeleton was human, a human fetus, tiny and fragile, with extremely rare mutations that affected the development of its bones. Its elongated skull, unusual rib count, and small stature were the result of these genetic variations, a natural yet extraordinary condition that had made the skeleton appear almost alien. Imagine the researchers in their quiet laboratories, softly analyzing the samples, their instruments humming gently. They worked patiently, carefully documenting every detail, understanding that the truth of life is often far more subtle than the stories our imagination can tell. Their discovery was not a disappointment, but a revelation of nature's astonishing diversity. Even in its fragility, even in its strangeness, the Atacama skeleton was entirely human, a reminder of how life can take forms that surprise us, that challenge our expectations, and yet remain part of the natural world. Now picture yourself standing in the desert, the skeleton's story echoing softly in your mind. The wind moves gently across the sand, the sun dips lower, casting long calm shadows across the landscape. You feel the vastness of the desert, the quiet patience of the earth, and the way it has held secrets for centuries, only revealing them when the time is right. Think about the journey of discovery itself, the slow passage from curiosity to careful investigation, the movement from speculation to understanding. For decades, people wondered about the possibility of alien life, and while that question still floats across the cosmos, the Atacama skeleton reminds us that mysteries are often closer to home than we imagine. As your thoughts drift with the desert wind, imagine the tiny skeleton lying quietly, still and serene, its story gently unfolding. Imagine the patterns of bones, the delicate structure, and the intricate details that tell a story of growth, mutation, and life's fragile beauty. It is a story of patience, of careful study, and of the quiet persistence of nature, patiently revealing itself to those willing to look closely. Feel the calm of the desert settling around you, the slow rhythmic pulse of the earth beneath your feet, and the gentle hush of time itself. Even the smallest life, the tiniest of skeletons, carries a story that stretches across centuries, whispering softly of nature's complexity and wonder. As you breathe slowly, imagine the scientists' quiet work, the soft hum of instruments, and the careful documentation of every detail. Their hands move slowly, deliberately, as they uncover the truth hidden in the fragile bones. Every tiny measurement, every trace of DNA, is part of a patient unfolding, a story told not in loud proclamations but in soft, careful observation. And as you settle into this gentle rhythm, let your mind drift further. Picture the desert at dusk, the colors softening into muted purples and grays. The wind carries no sound but a soft rustle of sand. The skeleton, the story, and the patient work of discovery all fade into the quiet stillness of the night. Every breath you take mirrors the slow, steady passage of time in the desert. Every thought becomes softer, gentler, quieter. You feel yourself becoming part of the landscape, the calm vastness of the Atacama wrapping around you like a soft blanket. The mystery that once seemed so extraordinary has been gently explained, but the wonder remains. Nature's surprises, the beauty of life's variation, and the patient unfolding of knowledge all converge in this quiet moment. Let that thought carry you deeper into relaxation, into the gentle folds of sleep, as the desert stretches endlessly, softly, silently, around you. Now, with your body relaxed and your mind calm, imagine the small skeleton resting peacefully in the dry desert sand. Its story is complete, yet the desert continues, timeless and eternal. And in this stillness, you too can rest, carried on the quiet, patient rhythm of history, science, and the gentle beauty of the natural world. The Connecticut vampire. In the mid-19th century, the small towns of New England were no strangers to fear. Life in this part of the United States could be harsh, with winters that blanketed the landscape in snow, cutting off villages from the outside world. Disease was an ever-present shadow, striking suddenly and without warning, often leaving entire families weakened, pale, and exhausted. It was during one of these periods, when tuberculosis, then known as consumption, spread through communities, that the stories of vampires began to take hold. People were terrified, but their fears were grounded in observation. Those who had succumbed to the disease often showed striking symptoms: pallid skin, sunken eyes, and coughing up blood. To the untrained eye, it appeared as though the disease had drained the life from the living, giving them the appearance of something unnatural. In this atmosphere of suspicion and dread, a particular case in Connecticut would come to symbolize the region's vampire panic. Archaeologists and historians would later refer to the burial of JB-55 as one of the most striking examples of these beliefs. The coffin itself was unusual, marked with brass tacks, spelling out the cryptic code JB-55. But it wasn't just the label that made this burial remarkable. Inside the coffin, the bones of the man later identified as John Barber had been arranged in an extraordinary way. His skull and femurs were deliberately placed in the form of a traditional skull and crossbones. Such a configuration was not a decorative choice, Across New England it had been a common practice to deal with those suspected of vampirism. The ritual itself was methodical. In communities terrified of death and disease, the belief took hold that the dead could somehow feed upon the living. Families who had lost multiple members to consumption sometimes believed that one of the deceased was not truly gone. To prevent this vampire from preying on the living, bodies were exhumed, and specific interventions were carried out. Sometimes the heart was burned, sometimes the body was decapitated, and often the bones were rearranged in symbolic formations to mark them as no longer a threat. John Barber, aged 55 at the time of his death, became one of these posthumous suspects. His illness had been tuberculosis, a disease that ravaged the lungs and left the skin pale, the eyes reddened, and occasionally caused bleeding. To the people who buried him, these were unmistakable signs of vampirism. Their fears, while unfounded in biological reality, were very real in the context of a community grappling with disease, death, and the unknown. The burial practices in New England at this time reflected a unique fusion of folklore, superstition, and pragmatic concern. Families were attempting to assert some control over death and disease. Rituals meant to protect those still living. Arranging a skull and femurs in a crossbones pattern was both symbolic and functional. It marked the body as dangerous, it reassured the living that they had acted, and it also provided a sense of order in a world that seemed increasingly chaotic. JB-55's coffin was more than a simple grave. It was a historical document, a record of fear and faith intertwined. Each movement of bone, each careful placement, tells a story of a people trying to survive. It reflects a worldview where the boundary between life and death was fragile, and where disease could inspire both grief and ritualized action. In modern times, curiosity about this and other similar burials led to scientific investigation. In 2019, researchers were finally able to analyze the remains of JB-55. DNA testing confirmed that the individual was indeed John Barber. The mysterious coat of brass tacks, the crossbones, and the whispered fears of vampirism all pointed to a man who had been very human, suffering from a very real disease. Tuberculosis, then, explained the pallor, the coughing up of blood, and the striking appearance that had once been interpreted as unnatural. Even with this scientific clarity, the story remains compelling. The burial practices tell us as much about the living as they do about the dead. The panic over vampires was not simply superstition. It was a response to vulnerability, to helplessness in the face of illness that no one could treat effectively. Families did what they could, using the tools available to them, ritual, folklore, and ingenuity to protect themselves. The JB-55 coffin is now one of the most studied examples of these practices. Archaeologists note the precision in the bone arrangement and the care in the labeling. The crossbones formation is repeated in other burials across New England, showing that this was not a random act, but part of a wider cultural response to fear and disease. John Barber's story also highlights the intersection of folklore and medicine. Communities, lacking scientific understanding, interpreted visual clues as signs of the supernatural. Pale skin, bloodied lips, and sunken eyes were the markers of the undead, but they were in reality the symptoms of a contagious disease. It is a reminder that history is often written not just in words but in gestures, rituals, and the ways humans attempt to make sense of suffering. The Connecticut vampire also fits into a broader narrative of American folk practices. From the mid-18th century to the 19th century, New England experienced multiple outbreaks of consumption. In each case, burial customs adapted, creating a body of ritualized practices designed to protect the living. Coffins were sometimes opened months after burial, bones rearranged, and symbols placed to ward off supernatural threats. Each act reflected both fear and hope, the attempt to balance superstition with survival. JB-55, when understood through modern science, is a man whose death was tragic but ordinary, yet his burial speaks volumes about a society navigating uncertainty and mortality. The choice to label the coffin, to mark the bones, and to use ritualized symbolism shows a community deeply aware of death's unpredictability and desperate for control. Through these practices, New Englanders created a system of cultural coping, blending the supernatural with the pragmatic. The Connecticut vampire is a testament to human imagination, belief, and the need to explain what cannot be easily controlled. It is a chapter of history where fear, folklore, and disease intersect, leaving a legacy both eerie and fascinating. Even centuries later, the story of JB-55 continues to capture attention. It illustrates how folklore adapts to real-world crises, how ritual can be a response to disease, and how communities, even without modern medicine, attempted to safeguard themselves. The skeleton, the coffin, and the bones arranged in skull and crossbones form a record of a very human story: fear, care, and the desire to protect loved ones. In examining JB-55, one sees not just a vampire of legend, but a reflection of a people facing mortality in a world without answers. The rituals, the symbols, and the Flying Dutchman. The story of the Flying Dutchman stretches across centuries, oceans, and imagination. Mariners, artists, and storytellers alike have passed down accounts of a ghostly ship endlessly roaming the seas, unable to find harbor, a vessel condemned to sail forever. The legend is old, tracing back at least to the 18th century, though whispers of cursed ships likely existed long before that. The Flying Dutchman is said to appear suddenly, a dark silhouette on the horizon. Sailors claim to see a ship hovering above the water, its sails filled with wind, even when the sea is calm. Sometimes, the ship is visible only briefly before vanishing into mist. Other times, it lingers, a haunting presence that chills the hearts of those who encounter it. Accounts of the Flying Dutchman vary, but a common theme emerges: a doomed captain and a cursed crew. The captain, sometimes named Van der Decken, is said to have defied the forces of nature, swearing to round the Cape of Good Hope even in the most violent storms. In his defiance, he and his crew were punished, cursed to sail the oceans for eternity. Sailors whispered that sighting the ship was a bad omen, a harbinger of disaster, storms, or death. For centuries, the Flying Dutchman became part of maritime folklore. Artists captured the ghostly vessel in paintings, emphasizing its otherworldly glow and its impossible presence above the water. Writers chronicled sightings, blending fact with fiction, creating a legend that would persist for generations. Even the 20th century saw reports, as sailors recounted encounters that blurred the line between reality and imagination. Modern science, however, offers a very different explanation. The ship that seems to float above the horizon is not a spectral vessel at all. It is an optical illusion, a phenomenon known as fata morgana. This occurs when layers of air at different temperatures bend light, causing distant objects such as ships to appear distorted, elevated, or even inverted. Under the right conditions, the hull of a ship can seem to hover above the water, creating the impression of a floating ghostly vessel. Fata Morgana is particularly common in maritime regions, where temperature inversions occur frequently. Cool air near the water's surface meets warmer air above, bending light in unusual ways. Sailors in the 18th and 19th centuries, lacking modern understanding of optics and atmospheric science, could only interpret these illusions through the lens of folklore. A ship that appeared impossibly suspended above the waves could only be supernatural. Despite this explanation, the allure of the Flying Dutchman endures. The legend has been immortalized in literature, opera, and film, each retelling adding new details, new dramatic flair. The ship becomes a symbol of obsession, punishment, and the relentless forces of fate. Its story is woven into maritime culture, a cautionary tale for those who challenge nature or venture too far into the unknown. Historical accounts describe specific sightings in the South African seas, particularly near the Cape of Good Hope, a treacherous area for sailors long before the advent of modern navigation. Storms, strong currents, and sudden fogs made voyages hazardous, and the fear of the unknown magnified every unusual event. A distant ship, seen through the distortion of Fata Morgana, became a tangible embodiment of these fears. The crew of the Flying Dutchman, according to legend, is as haunting as the ship itself. Some accounts speak of sailors who continue their duties in silence, their eyes vacant, their expressions grim. Others describe them as shadows, moving with the motions of a normal crew, but with an eerie stillness that defies human perception. These details contributed to the sense of dread surrounding any reported sighting. Art and literature have preserved these images of the Flying Dutchman for centuries. Romantic painters depicted the ship with dark, storm-filled skies, its sails torn, its rigging rattling in ghostly wind. Writers used the legend to explore themes of isolation, guilt, and the inexorable pull of destiny. Each story emphasized the impossibility of escape, the eternal nature of the curse, and the unsettling beauty of a ship that exists at the edge of perception. Even in the 20th century, optical illusions continued to fuel new sightings. Mariners reported ships hovering over the water, distorted and shimmering, as if lifted by unseen forces. Scientific investigation confirmed the causes, light refraction and temperature inversions, but the legends persisted. The Flying Dutchman had become more than a physical phenomenon. It was a symbol, a narrative that connected generations of sailors to the mystery of the sea. The psychological aspect of the legend cannot be ignored. Long voyages, isolation, and exposure to the harsh elements of the open ocean heightened perception, leading to exaggerated reports of impossible events. Human imagination, coupled with natural optical phenomena, created a feedback loop. The more sailors believed in the Flying Dutchman, the more likely they were to interpret ambiguous visual cues as evidence of its presence. This interplay between reality and perception demonstrates why some legends endure while others fade. The Flying Dutchman is anchored in human experience, in fear, hope, and fascination. It represents the boundary between the known and unknown, the real and the imagined. Even knowing the scientific explanation does not entirely remove the sense of wonder, because the ship exists as much in culture and memory as it ever did in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Today, sightings of the Flying Dutchman are rare, but the story persists. Its place in popular culture, from paintings to operas, novels to films, ensures that it will continue to capture imaginations. The legend reminds us that humans have always sought to explain the unexplainable, to give form to fear, and to find meaning in the patterns of nature. The Flying Dutchman is thus more than a ghost ship. It is a convergence of history, folklore, natural science, and human psychology. It tells the story of sailors navigating both treacherous waters and the limits of their own understanding, and it stands as a reminder that even optical illusions, when observed through the lens of fear and imagination, can give rise to some of the most enduring legends of all time. The Abydos boats, transporting the pharaohs through the afterlife. In the sands of ancient Egypt, near the sacred city of Abydos, lies one of the most intriguing archaeological discoveries ever made, a collection of enormous wooden boats, carefully buried in the desert over 4,000 years ago. These are known as the Abydos boats, and they were constructed not for the river, but for the journey beyond life itself. Abydos was one of Egypt's most significant religious centers, a place closely associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife and resurrection. Pilgrims traveled to the city to honor the dead, to connect with the divine, and to witness rituals that bridged the world of the living and the eternal. The desert around Abydos, vast and arid, seemed like the perfect location for sacred burials. It was a land that felt timeless, where the sands could preserve secrets for millennia. The first of the Abydos boats were discovered in the 20th century, buried just a few meters from the temple of Seti I. At first their presence puzzled archaeologists. Why would ancient Egyptians go to such lengths to bury massive wooden vessels far from the Nile? Why construct them in sections, disassemble them, and then carefully place them beneath the sand? As researchers studied these boats, a larger picture emerged. They were funerary objects, intended to serve pharaohs in the afterlife. Ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end, but a transition, a passage to another world, where the journey of the soul mirrored the voyage on earth. For a pharaoh, this meant a vessel that could carry him safely through the afterlife, guided by divine forces. The largest of these boats measures over 40 meters in length, crafted entirely from cedar imported from Lebanon. This alone was remarkable, considering the logistical challenges of transporting such timber across hundreds of miles of desert and river. Every plank, every joint, and every rope was meticulously designed, demonstrating a mastery of woodworking and engineering that continues to astound historians today. The construction of these boats reveals a deep understanding of balance, buoyancy, and durability. Though they were intended for ritual and symbolic purposes, the craftsmanship suggests they could have actually floated, capable of navigating the waters of the Nile. Some scholars theorize that the Abydos boats were not purely ceremonial. They were functional vessels designed to embody the pharaoh's divine authority, both in life and beyond. Buried alongside the pharaoh's tomb, the boats were oriented carefully according to religious principles. They were aligned with the cardinal points, their bows pointing toward sacred sites, ensuring that the pharaoh's soul would follow a path of cosmic significance. This alignment reflects the Egyptians' belief in Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order, and their understanding that the afterlife was a continuation of the balance they maintained in the world of the living. Excavations of the Abydos boats have revealed astonishing details. Wooden planks were joined using mortise and tenon joints, fastened with wooden pegs, a technique that allowed for both strength and flexibility. The craftsmanship was precise, almost modern in its execution. Some boats contained remains of oars and fittings that suggest these vessels were not merely symbolic. They were modeled after real ships that had traveled the Nile, vessels familiar to the pharaoh during his life. The discovery of Abydos boats also provides insight into the religious mindset of ancient Egyptians. Boats were central to Egyptian cosmology. The sun god Ra himself traveled across the sky in a solar bark, a vessel that carried him through day and night. To accompany the pharaoh with boats in his tomb was to ensure that he too could journey alongside the gods, crossing the celestial waters safely and eternally. Some of the Abydos boats were buried in pits, their wooden frames carefully protected from the harsh desert environment. Others were assembled in situ, their construction creating a ritualistic space in itself. Archaeologists have suggested that the act of burying the boats was a ceremonial practice, part of a larger funerary complex designed to honor the deceased and guarantee their rebirth in the afterlife. The significance of the Abydos boats goes beyond mere funerary architecture. They reveal the Egyptians' extraordinary ability to blend practical engineering with religious symbolism. Every plank carries meaning, every rope has a purpose, and every boat is a reflection of the pharaoh's journey from mortality to eternity. Even thousands of years later, the preservation of these boats provides a tangible link to the ancient world. The desert sands acted as both canvas and protector, ensuring that the craftsmanship, the planning, and the religious intent survived through the centuries. Modern researchers, studying these vessels, gain insight into the sophisticated knowledge of the Egyptians, their understanding of woodworking, geometry, and sacred architecture. The Abydos boats also underscore the importance of the Nile in Egyptian life and belief. The river was more than a physical resource. It was a spiritual conduit, a highway that connected the living with the divine. Ships buried at Abydos were not just for transport, They were metaphors for passage, movement, and eternal continuity. One of the most remarkable aspects of these discoveries is the scale of human labor involved. Constructing a single boat required hundreds of skilled workers, artisans, and laborers, all coordinated in an effort that combined engineering expertise with ritual precision. Transporting timber, shaping planks, assembling the hulls, and finally burying the completed vessel demanded not only physical effort but meticulous planning, careful organization, and adherence to religious practices. The Abydos boats continue to captivate historians, archaeologists, and the public. Exhibitions and reconstructions have allowed people to see the sheer scale of these vessels and to understand the sophistication of ancient Egyptian civilization. Scholars study them not just as artifacts, but as windows into the beliefs, practices, and technological abilities of a society that thrived thousands of years ago. In the context of Egyptian funerary traditions, the Abydos boats serve as a reminder that death was not feared but managed, ritualized, and integrated into a larger cosmology. They symbolize the Egyptians' mastery over both the physical and spiritual realms. The boats are an enduring testament to a civilization that understood the power of preparation, the importance of ritual, and the necessity of bridging the human with the divine. By studying these boats, we gain insight into how the ancient Egyptians perceived life, death, and eternity. They remind us that technology and belief were deeply intertwined. They show us a culture that celebrated ingenuity, spirituality, and the continuity of the soul. And they stand as silent witnesses to the ambitions, fears, and aspirations of a people who lived millennia ago, who sought to transport their pharaohs, not just across the Nile, but across the threshold of eternity itself. Nemrut, the mountain of the gods, rising high above the surrounding plains of southern Turkey. Nemrut is a mountain that dominates the landscape, its summit piercing the sky at 2,134 meters. The peak belongs to the Taurus mountain range, which stretches like a natural barrier between the Mediterranean coast and the central Anatolian plateau. For millennia, this region has been a crossroads of cultures, ideas, and empires. But it is Nemrut itself that holds one of the most enigmatic legacies of the ancient world. In 62 BC, King Antiochus I Theos of Commagene undertook a monumental project atop this remote summit. Antiochus ruled a small but strategically located kingdom, a place where the influences of Greek, Persian, and Anatolian culture converged. In his ambition, he sought to transcend the ordinary confines of kingship. He constructed a tomb sanctuary, a place that would elevate him physically and spiritually closer to the divine. Antiochus was not content to be remembered merely as a king of mortals. He devised a personal cult in which he would be worshipped after death, a hybrid of Greek and Zoroastrian traditions. In his inscriptions, he proclaimed his desire to be deified, to join the ranks of gods, and to be remembered for eternity. The mountain, remote and almost inaccessible, was chosen deliberately. It was a place far from ordinary mortals, a site where he could be venerated among the heavens themselves. The sanctuary atop Nemrut is a marvel of scale and symbolism. Massive statues, some towering over 8 meters high, represent a pantheon that merges Greek and Persian deities, alongside the likeness of Antiochus himself. Each statue was carefully positioned, facing the sunrise or sunset, aligning with celestial patterns in ways that suggest both reverence and meticulous planning. The heads of the statues, today scattered across the summit, once sat atop colossal bodies, watching over the sacred terraces. The terraces themselves form a structured and ceremonial complex. The eastern and western platforms are aligned with astronomical precision. Scholars believe these alignments were intended to mark solstices, connecting the king and the gods with the rhythms of the cosmos. Walkers on the summit could witness the sun rise and set over the mountains, illuminating the faces of deities and the king, a ritual performance frozen in stone. Antiochus's vision was ambitious in its integration of culture, religion, and politics. By fusing Greek deities like Zeus with Persian influences such as Ahura Mazda, he created a religious syncretism that reinforced his own authority. The king's image, often depicted alongside these gods, signaled both power and divine favor. In doing so, Antiochus ensured that his tomb would not simply be a resting place but a stage for a lasting cult, a monument that transcended time and human life. The inscriptions on the site provide insight into his intentions. Antiochus detailed the ceremonies, the hierarchy of gods, and the order in which rituals should occur. He wrote not only of himself but of the need for his subjects to maintain these sacred observances long after his death. The mountain statues and inscriptions together formed an enduring narrative, a testament to a ruler's desire for immortality through both physical grandeur and spiritual significance. Constructing such a sanctuary atop Nemrut presented immense challenges. The mountain's summit is remote, often inaccessible due to snow and harsh weather conditions. Transporting massive stones, carving intricate statues, and assembling terraces at this elevation required a workforce of extraordinary skill and determination. Every block of stone, every sculpted face, represents not only devotion but also remarkable engineering and logistical planning for the period. The iconography atop Nemrut reflects a world in which power, religion, and identity were inseparable. The combination of Greek and Persian deities, along with the inclusion of the king, speaks to a society at the crossroads of civilizations, aware of its history, and eager to assert its place in the cosmic order. It is an artistic expression of diplomacy, religion, and personal ambition, carved and raised in stone at a height where the air is thin and the horizon stretches endlessly. For centuries the mountain remained remote and largely forgotten, its grandeur hidden from the eyes of the wider world. When rediscovered, scholars were struck by the scale, artistry, and symbolism. Nemrut is not simply a tomb, it is a stage, a narrative, a temple, and a monument all at once. It embodies the vision of a king who sought to control his legacy, shape religious practice, and leave an indelible mark on history. The site of Nemrut continues to inspire awe. The colossal heads, some toppled but preserved, hint at the majesty that once existed. Terraces and altars reveal the meticulous planning and ceremonial significance. Archaeologists have worked to understand not only the construction, but the worldview that gave rise to such an extraordinary project. In every stone, every inscription, the presence of Antiochus and his vision endures. Nemrut is more than a burial site. It is a testament to ambition, belief, and the intersection of cultures. It reflects a ruler's desire to transcend mortality, the blending of religious traditions, and the ability of humans to shape the landscape in pursuit of meaning. The mountain, statues, and inscriptions together form a narrative that reaches across time, connecting the past with those who study it today. In understanding Nemrut, we glimpse a society in which kingship, divinity, and art were inseparable. The mountain, silent and imposing, holds the legacy of a ruler who sought to become immortal through stone, ritual, and worship. Every sculpture, every terrace, and every inscription tells a story of devotion, ingenuity, and the human desire to reach toward the divine. The summit of Nemrut remains one of the most compelling archaeological sites in the world. It is a place where history, religion, and monumental art converge. It is a reminder of the lengths to which a ruler would go to secure his memory, to align himself with the cosmos, and to create a legacy that could outlast centuries. Nemrut endures not only as a tomb, but as a symbol of ambition, cultural fusion, and the eternal human quest to leave a mark upon the world. Lucy, the skeleton that changed everything. In 1974, in the arid plains of Ethiopia, a discovery was made that would transform the study of human evolution. Among the layers of rock and sediment, a skeleton lay hidden for over 3 million years. When paleontologists unearthed it, they were initially struck by its completeness, its preservation, and the story it carried from a time long before written history. This skeleton was named Lucy, not for any ancient lineage or scientific convention, but after the Beatles' song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which played in the camp on the day of the discovery. Yet despite the light-hearted naming, the implications of Lucy's existence were profound. She belonged to a species newly described at the time, Australopithecus afarensis. Over 3.2 million years old, Lucy would become one of the most important fossils in the study of human origins. Australopithecus afarensis was not merely a curiosity of the past. The skeleton revealed a species that walked upright, a key step in the evolution of hominins. Lucy's pelvis and leg bones showed adaptations for bipedalism, a defining trait that separated her kind from other primates. Her skull, smaller than that of a modern human, still carried the hints of intelligence and social complexity. In many ways, Lucy was a bridge between ancient primates and the humans who would eventually walk the earth. Prior to Lucy's discovery, our understanding of early hominins was fragmented. Fossils were rare, and the evolutionary path from primate to human was a puzzle with missing pieces. Lucy provided a remarkable level of clarity. Her skeleton was about 40% complete, an extraordinary find in paleoanthropology, giving scientists the ability to reconstruct posture, gait, and even aspects of daily life. Millions of years ago, Ethiopia, the site of Lucy's discovery, is itself a landscape shaped by time and geology. The Afar Triangle, a region of volcanic activity and deep canyons, has preserved fossils in ways that other regions cannot. Layers of ash and sediment act as a natural archive, capturing the remains of species that once lived there. Lucy's skeleton was one of many, but it became the most famous, the emblem of an entire chapter in human history. The significance of Lucy extends beyond her skeleton. She offered insight into the social and environmental conditions of her time. Australopithecus afarensis lived in a mixed environment of open savanna and scattered woodlands. They were likely omnivorous, relying on a diet of fruits, nuts, tubers, and small animals. Their survival required adaptation, cooperation, and ingenuity. Lucy's small stature, roughly 1 meter tall, suggests she was agile, able to navigate both trees and open terrain, balancing safety and sustenance. Lucy also had profound cultural implications. The discovery emphasized Africa as the cradle of humanity. It reinforced the idea that modern humans share deep roots on this continent, and that understanding human evolution requires looking to these ancient landscapes, preserved by geology and time. Lucy became a symbol not just of scientific discovery, but of human heritage, linking millions of years of evolution to the people of Ethiopia today. This was not the first fossil of its kind. 50 years earlier, in South Africa, scientists had uncovered Australopithecus africanus, a related species represented by a skull called the Tong child. The Tong child, small and fragile, had hinted at bipedalism and evolutionary adaptation, but it lacked the completeness that Lucy provided. Together, these fossils mapped a lineage, revealing a branching tree of early hominins that gradually led toward modern humans. Lucy's discovery also revolutionized scientific methods. Researchers could study limb proportions, joint structure, and spinal alignment in unprecedented detail. The fossil allowed the examination of how Australopithecus afarensis moved, how they carried themselves, and how their bodies responded to environmental pressures. Even soft tissue reconstructions, modeled from bone and comparative anatomy, provided insights into posture, locomotion, and strength. Beyond anatomy, Lucy sparked debates about behavior. Did she climb trees regularly, or primarily walk on the ground? How did she care for her young? Was her species social, living in groups, cooperating to find food and avoid predators? Each answer gleaned from her bones has deepened our understanding of what it meant to be a hominin at this point in prehistory. The discovery of Lucy also inspired generations of scientists and researchers, establishing Ethiopia as a central site for paleoanthropological studies. Excavations continued, uncovering more Australopithecus fossils, footprints, and tools, all painting a more detailed picture of life 3 million years ago. Lucy remains the centerpiece of this narrative, her skeleton an enduring testament to survival, adaptation, and the intricate path that evolution has traced across the millennia. Lucy is not just a fossil, she is a story written in bone. She tells of landscapes transformed by rivers and volcanoes, of forests and savannas, of predators and prey, and of a species learning to walk upright while the world around it shifted and changed. She is a symbol of discovery, curiosity, and the relentless search for knowledge about our own origins. Through Lucy, we glimpse not only the physical form of our ancestors, but the broader context of their existence. We see how biology, environment, and time interact to shape life. We see a species that endured challenges, adapted to survive, and laid the foundations for all that would follow. And we see that even a single skeleton, discovered in the sands of Ethiopia, can change everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Millions of years later, Lucy's story continues. She remains central to discussions of human evolution, a touchstone for science and education, a reminder of the deep connections between past and present. Her skeleton endures as both artifact and symbol, a bridge across time that speaks to the origins of humankind, the resilience of life, and the endless journey of discovery that continues to this day. Troy, the lost city of legend. For centuries, the city of Troy occupied a unique place between history and myth. Its story was told through poetry, passed down by generations, yet its very existence remained uncertain. The Trojan War, immortalized in Homer's Iliad, was one of the most famous epic tales of ancient Greece. It recounted the valor of heroes, the fury of gods, and the destruction of a city that seemed almost too legendary to have been real. Homer's epic introduced figures like Achilles, whose wrath shaped the fate of armies, and Odysseus, whose cunning defined the strategies of war. The story of the Trojan horse, the ruse that allowed Greek soldiers to infiltrate the city walls, has become a symbol of cleverness and subterfuge. Yet for centuries, scholars debated whether Troy existed at all. Was it merely a literary creation, a symbolic representation of conflict and civilization, or was there a real city behind the epic? The search for Troy began in earnest during the 19th century. Historians, archaeologists, and adventurers scoured ancient texts, seeking geographical clues in the descriptions of Homer. They focused on a site called Hisarlik, in western Turkey, where mound-like formations suggested successive layers of ancient settlements. For decades, the notion that Hisarlik was Troy remained controversial. Skeptics argued that myths could not be trusted as historical evidence, and that the city described in the Iliad might never have existed. In the late 1800s, a breakthrough came when Heinrich Schliemann, a German archaeologist, began excavations at Hisarlik. Schliemann was determined to uncover the city behind the legend. His work revealed walls, fortifications, and artifacts that spanned millennia, demonstrating that a series of civilizations had indeed occupied the site. His findings, while controversial in their methods and interpretation, sparked global fascination. Suddenly, Troy was no longer just a story. It was a tangible place that could be studied, explored, and understood. Archaeologists identified multiple layers at Hisarlik, representing different cities built one atop another over centuries. Troy Savethand, dated around the 13th and 12th centuries BCE, is often linked to the time of the legendary war. Excavations revealed evidence of destruction, including fire-damaged buildings and fortifications, suggesting that the city had endured sieges or catastrophic events. While direct evidence of the Trojan horse remains elusive, the physical existence of Troy provided a historical anchor for Homer's epic. The identification of Troy was more than an academic victory. It bridged myth and reality, showing how human memory, storytelling, and archaeology could intersect. Troy became a place where imagination and history met, where poets and scholars alike could ponder the lives of those who may have walked the same streets described in epic verse. The city, once lost to time, offered insight into Bronze Age civilizations in Anatolia, their architecture, trade, and social organization. The architecture of Troy reveals a sophisticated society. Massive stone walls encircled the city, while layered settlements indicate periods of growth, destruction, and rebuilding. Pottery, tools, and artifacts illustrate daily life, commerce, and the cultural influences of neighboring civilizations. Troy was not merely a battlefield. It was a thriving urban center, a hub of human ingenuity and adaptation. One of the most compelling aspects of Troy is its resilience. Built in a region prone to conflict and shifting empires, the city endured centuries of occupation. Each layer of ruins tells a story of renewal and survival, of people who rebuilt, adapted, and carried forward their traditions. In this way, Troy itself mirrors the epic narrative, a place of conflict, courage, and persistence. Even today, Hisarlik continues to reveal secrets. Modern archaeological methods, including ground-penetrating radar and stratigraphic analysis, uncover further details about the city's layout, water systems, and fortifications. These discoveries illuminate how ancient people managed resources, defended themselves, and structured their society. The legend of Troy, intertwined with physical evidence, becomes a window into a distant civilization that shaped the imagination of generations. The story of the Trojan War, whether fully historical or partly mythological, underscores timeless themes: honor, strategy, love, and the consequences of human action. Troy, as a physical city, reinforces these narratives, showing how human societies rise, fall, and leave enduring marks on the landscape. Its discovery reshaped our understanding of ancient history, proving that myths can carry kernels of truth, preserved in soil, stone, and memory. Troy remains a symbol of the power of stories to survive across centuries. It reminds us that the line between legend and history is often blurred, and that the search for truth can span not just decades but millennia. The city itself, layered in earth and time, stands as a testament to human civilization, to imagination, and to the enduring fascination with places that lie at the intersection of fact and myth. In tracing the story of Troy, one sees the enduring impact of exploration, curiosity, and scholarship. From Homer's verses to Schliemann's excavations, the city has been both an idea and a reality. It exemplifies the way humans seek meaning in the past, reconstructing events, cultures, and lives that shape the foundation of history. Through the ruins of Troy, the voices of the past persist. Each wall, each artifact, each stratified layer carries stories of ambition, war, and survival. The city continues to inspire imagination, scholarship, and wonder, reminding us that even the most legendary tales may have roots in reality, waiting to be uncovered beneath centuries of soil and stone. The sacrifices of Huanchaquito. In 2011, near the ancient city of Chonchon in Peru, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that sent shockwaves through the study of pre-Columbian civilizations. Buried beneath layers of sand and soil, they found the remains of 140 children and 200 llamas, placed together in shallow graves. The site, dating to around 1450 CE, belonged to the Chimu civilization, a culture that dominated the northern coast of Peru before the rise of the Inca Empire. What made Huanchaquito so remarkable was not just the number of lives involved, but the scale and specificity of the ritual. This is the largest known site of child and animal sacrifice in recorded history. It represented a ceremony unlike any previously documented, revealing a society whose beliefs intertwined deeply with nature, religion, and the survival of their civilization. The Chimu people were master builders, artists, and administrators. Their capital, Chen Chen, was the largest adobe city in the Americas, a sprawling urban center with complex administrative systems, irrigation networks, and architectural sophistication. Yet, like all societies, the Chimu were vulnerable to the forces of nature. The northern coast of Peru is prone to extreme climatic events, particularly the periodic flooding caused by El Niño cycles. These natural disasters could devastate crops, livestock, and infrastructure, threatening the survival of entire communities. Researchers believe that the Huanchaquito sacrifices were conducted in response to one such catastrophic event. Floodwaters had risen, destroying farmland and destabilizing the Chimu state. In the eyes of the priests and rulers, extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary measures. The children and llamas, buried together in precise arrangements, were offered to the gods in a desperate attempt to restore balance and protect their people from further calamity. The organization of the burials suggests meticulous planning. The children were carefully positioned, some with arms folded, others laid out in ways that indicate ritualistic intent, rather than mere disposal of bodies. The llamas were arranged alongside them, forming a symbolic connection between human life, animal life, and the divine. Archaeologists observed that some of the children had been prepared for sacrifice over time, hinting at a culture in which such offerings were deeply ceremonial and not merely reactive. The scale of the Huanchaquito ritual reveals the profound relationship between the Chimu and their environment. Their religion was intimately connected to the forces of nature. Rain, sun, river, and flood were not merely elements, but manifestations of divine will. Sacrifices were a form of communication, a plea to appease gods and secure protection. In this context, the deaths of children and llamas were viewed as a necessary contribution to the survival of the community. Chemical analysis of the remains shows that the children were healthy, well-fed, and cared for prior to their deaths, suggesting they were chosen intentionally, possibly as part of a ceremonial caste or societal practice. The llamas, too, were young and carefully prepared, reinforcing the notion that this was a ritual of deliberate significance, not an act of random violence. The combination of human and animal sacrifice emphasizes the Chimu belief in interconnectedness, where the lives of people and animals could influence the balance of nature. The Huanchaquito site also provides insights into the logistical and cultural complexity of the Chimu. Coordinating the preparation, gathering, and execution of such a large-scale ritual would have required planning, knowledge, and societal cooperation. Priests, artisans, and laborers must have worked together, following precise protocols and rituals, ensuring that the ceremonies fulfilled both spiritual and communal objectives. Beyond its immediate religious significance, the Huanchaquito sacrifices offer a glimpse into the psychology and worldview of the Chimu people. They reveal a civilization that faced existential threats with extraordinary measures, where belief in the gods and fear of natural disasters guided decisions at every level of society. They show a culture in which devotion, ritual, and survival were inseparable. The site has since become a vital point of study for archaeologists and anthropologists, shedding light on previously unknown practices of pre-Columbian Peru. Huanchaquito reminds us that ancient societies were capable of acts that challenge modern understanding. Yet within their worldview, these actions were necessary, rational, and deeply meaningful. In studying Huanchaquito, researchers have also gained perspective on the resilience of the Chimu civilization. Though the sacrifices were dramatic, they were part of broader cultural, religious, and environmental strategies that allowed the Chimu to thrive for centuries in a challenging landscape. Their cities, canals, and rituals all demonstrate a civilization attuned to both human needs and the unpredictable forces of nature. The burial of children and llamas at Huanchaquito, while unsettling, is a powerful testament to the lengths societies will go to confront the unknown. It speaks to the deep human desire to control the uncontrollable, to negotiate with forces beyond comprehension, and to find order amidst chaos. In these graves, the Chimu left a story that endures, a story of devotion, fear, ingenuity, and the fragile yet determined pursuit of survival. Huanchaquito remains one of the most haunting and significant archaeological discoveries in the Americas. It forces us to confront questions about belief, ritual, and the relationship between humans and nature. It reminds us that the past was not distant or detached. It was immediate, urgent, and filled with acts that defined the survival and identity of entire civilizations. Through the remains of children and llamas, through the careful excavation and analysis, we gain insight into a culture that sought to navigate the forces of life and death with devotion, precision, and faith. Huanchaquito is not just a site of sacrifice, it is a window into the human experience, the power of belief, and the enduring connection between people, animals, and the natural world. The Voynich Manuscript, the book that defies understanding. In 1912, a Polish antiquarian named Wilfrid Voynich came across a discovery that would puzzle scholars for over a century. While searching for rare books and artifacts in Europe, he acquired a manuscript unlike any other. Bound in worn leather and filled with fragile yellowed pages, the book seemed ordinary at first. But its contents were extraordinary: bizarre illustrations, strange symbols, and writing in a language that no one could decipher. The manuscript, now known as the Voynich manuscript, was later carbon dated to the early 1400s. Its provenance suggests it once belonged to a Czech alchemist, yet no historical records provide clear details of its origin or purpose. Every page reveals a world that is simultaneously familiar and alien, bridging science, art, and enigma in ways that continue to baffle researchers. The most striking feature of the Voynich manuscript is its text. Lines of script flow from left to right, forming paragraphs, sentences, and words, yet no one has ever been able to read them. Linguists, cryptologists, mathematicians, and computer scientists have all attempted to crack the code. Some propose that the writing encodes an unknown language. Others argue that it is an elaborate cipher, a sophisticated secret intended to obscure knowledge from all but a select few. Despite countless efforts, the manuscript resists interpretation. Interspersed with the mysterious text are illustrations that are equally confounding. The pages depict strange plants, unlike anything known in modern botany, with twisting stems, peculiar leaves, and flowers that appear fantastical, almost as if imagined from dreams. Other sections display astronomical and astrological charts, intricate diagrams that hint at knowledge of the heavens, yet their precise meaning remains elusive. One of the most intriguing sections features women bathing in green liquids, often connected by pipes or tubes. Some researchers speculate that these images represent medicinal or alchemical processes, a guide to health, or even mystical rituals. Others suggest they could symbolize something symbolic or allegorical, a visual language that accompanied the unknown text. The manuscript's combination of organic, mechanical, and celestial imagery creates a world that is coherent within its own logic, yet utterly foreign to modern understanding. Wilfred Voynich himself spent years trying to uncover the manuscript's secrets. He presented it to scholars and cryptographers, hoping someone could read it, hoping someone could reveal its purpose. Over time, the manuscript passed through the hands of libraries and private collectors, each generation adding new hypotheses, experiments, and attempts at decryption. Yet the mystery persists. Some theories propose that the manuscript is a medicinal or botanical guide, possibly created by a Renaissance physician or alchemist. The detailed plant illustrations, combined with diagrams of baths and bodily fluids, suggest an interest in health in the human body. Others suggest a more esoteric origin, an astrological or magical manual, a repository of occult knowledge, or even a manual for secret societies. More skeptical interpretations suggest the manuscript could be a hoax, an elaborate creation intended to baffle and impress, perhaps never meant to be read at all. Yet statistical analyses of the text show patterns consistent with linguistic structure, frequency of characters, word repetition, and syntax, indicating that it may be more than random symbols. Its very complexity has led some to describe it as the ultimate intellectual puzzle, a coded artifact designed to resist understanding. The Voynich manuscript also offers a glimpse into the history of knowledge itself. It embodies a period when science, magic, and art were intertwined. In the early 1400s, alchemists experimented with herbs, celestial bodies, and mystical forces, blending observation with imagination. The manuscript may represent one of the few surviving records of this worldview, a tangible piece of intellectual history whose meaning has slipped through time. Even in the 21st century, the manuscript continues to fascinate. Modern technologies, including artificial intelligence, statistical modeling, and multispectral imaging, have been applied in attempts to decipher its text. Some have claimed partial breakthroughs, proposing connections to obscure languages or code systems, but no consensus exists. The Voynich manuscript remains a living mystery, an object that challenges assumptions about knowledge, authorship, and human ingenuity. Its endurance speaks to the human desire to understand, to interpret, and to uncover secrets hidden for centuries. Each page invites speculation, analysis, and wonder. The manuscript resists closure, refusing to yield a simple answer, compelling anyone who studies it to question the nature of language, meaning, and understanding itself. Beyond its scholarly intrigue, the Voynich manuscript captures imagination because it represents a tangible connection to a past that is inaccessible, yet intimate. The hand that wrote it, the mind that conceived the plants, the charts and the bathing figures, all of this belonged to someone real, working centuries ago, yet their purpose remains a mystery. The manuscript is a window into a mind, a culture, and a history that exists just beyond comprehension. The Voynich manuscript is more than an artifact. It is a reminder that the past is not always fully knowable, that some knowledge is designed to challenge, to puzzle, to endure. It blurs the boundary between science and art, reason and imagination, leaving questions that may never be answered. Through its pages, the manuscript continues to speak, not in words that can be read, but in wonder, curiosity, and the timeless fascination with the unknown. Scholars, cryptographers, and enthusiasts return to it again and again, drawn by the same enduring question: what was the purpose of this book? And what can it teach us about the minds, beliefs, and creativity of those who came before? In the Voynich manuscript, the impossible is preserved in ink and vellum, a book that refuses translation, yet invites endless exploration. It remains one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in archaeology, cryptology, and history, a testament to human curiosity and the enduring mysteries of the past. The Staffordshire Hoard, a treasure beyond imagination. In 2009, a field in Staffordshire, England, became the site of a discovery that would redefine the understanding of Anglo-Saxon history. A metal detector enthusiast named Terry Herbert was exploring the land, scanning for signs of the past, when his device picked up something extraordinary. Buried beneath the soil lay a treasure trove unlike anything previously known. Over 3,500 items of gold and silver, primarily military artifacts, now known as the Staffordshire Hoard. The significance of the find cannot be overstated. Before Staffordshire, much of Anglo-Saxon material culture had been reconstructed from small scattered fragments, making it difficult for historians to fully appreciate the society's wealth, craftsmanship, and complexity. The hoard alone now accounts for more than 60% of all Anglo-Saxon gold and silver artifacts known to exist. Its discovery opened an entirely new window into the lives, beliefs, and practices of a civilization that flourished over 1,000 years ago. The items in the hoard were primarily martial in nature. Sword fittings gleamed with intricate designs, helmet fragments bore evidence of extraordinary craftsmanship, and decorative jewelry hinted at both status and artistic sophistication. The sheer quantity and quality of these objects suggested a level of wealth and power among the Anglo-Saxon elite that had previously been underestimated. These were not everyday items, they were symbols of authority, prestige, and religious significance. Historians were particularly struck by the intertwining of warfare and faith within the collection. Many of the artifacts display Christian motifs, crosses, and iconography, revealing a culture in transition. During the Anglo-Saxon period, Christianity was spreading across England, often blending with traditional martial and pagan practices. The Staffordshire Hoard embodies this synthesis, providing insight into a time when religious belief and military prowess were deeply interconnected. The craftsmanship of the hoard is remarkable. Gold and silver were worked with precision, forming complex patterns, filigree, and interlacing designs that reflect both aesthetic sensibility and technical mastery. Each piece, from the smallest fitting to the largest fragment, carries evidence of meticulous planning and skilled execution. Scholars have noted that these objects were likely produced by specialized artisans, suggesting that Anglo-Saxon society invested heavily in the creation of ceremonial and martial items. Equally intriguing is the context of the hoard's burial. The items were carefully hidden, yet the reasons remain uncertain. Some historians speculate that the hoard was buried during a time of conflict, possibly as a way to protect treasures from invading forces, or to safeguard offerings dedicated to religious or royal authority. Others suggest that the collection could represent war booty, accumulated through battles and then hidden for security or ritual purposes. Whatever the reason, the deliberate concealment reflects both strategy and reverence, linking wealth, warfare, and spirituality. The Staffordshire Hoard also provides evidence of social structure. The military nature of the items indicates the importance of warriors and elite combatants within Anglo-Saxon society. At the same time, the presence of jewelry and ornate fittings suggests that status, prestige, and display were critical components of power. The hoard is a testament to a culture in which skill, bravery, and wealth were intimately connected, where material objects conveyed identity and authority. The discovery in Staffordshire has reshaped historical narratives. Prior to the hoard, Anglo-Saxon England was often portrayed as fragmented and modest, with limited resources or centralized wealth. The hoard challenges that assumption, revealing a society capable of producing extraordinary artifacts and accumulating remarkable treasures. It demonstrates that wealth and craftsmanship were far more sophisticated than previously believed, providing a clearer picture of political, military, and religious life. Technological analysis of the hoard has also revealed new insights. Metallurgical studies show that the gold and silver were of high purity, sourced from local and possibly imported materials. The techniques used, engraving, inlay, and interlacing, indicate a deep understanding of metallurgy and design, underscoring the technical sophistication of the period. Every piece tells a story, not only of artistry, but of the knowledge, tools, and vision required to create it. Beyond the academic implications, the hoard captures imagination because it bridges past and present. It connects modern observers with the Anglo-Saxon world in a tangible, almost intimate way. Each artifact carries with it a sense of history, the hands that crafted it, the warriors who wielded it, the leaders who commissioned it. Buried for centuries, hidden from view, these treasures waited to be rediscovered, and in doing so they have reshaped the story of a people long vanished. The Staffordshire Hoard is more than a collection of gold and silver. It is a narrative encoded in metal. It speaks of conflict and ceremony, belief and artistry, wealth and identity. It reminds us that history is often layered, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for discovery. The hoard is a testament to human creativity, ambition, and the ways in which societies use material culture to express power, devotion, and status. Even today, scholars continue to study the Staffordshire Hoard, analyzing patterns, inscriptions, and techniques to unlock further insights. Each new study adds depth to our understanding, revealing the complexity of Anglo-Saxon culture and the intricate connections between warfare, faith, and art. The field in Staffordshire, once ordinary, has become extraordinary. Through the hoard we glimpse a world where gold and silver were more than currency. They were symbols of human endeavor, devotion, and identity. They tell a story that transcends time, connecting us to a civilization that flourished, struggled, and left an enduring mark on history. The Staffordshire hoard endures as both a physical treasure and a historical revelation, reshaping what we know about the Anglo-Saxons. Its discovery proves that even buried beneath centuries of soil, the past has the power to speak, to astonish, and to redefine our understanding of human history. The Neolithic city of Shimao, an ancient urban marvel. In 1976, archaeologists in Xianshe, China, made a discovery that at first seemed modest, even ordinary. Initial surveys suggested a small settlement, perhaps an outpost or a segment of the Great Wall. It was easy to overlook its significance, but over the next 3.5 decades, as researchers dug deeper, a picture began to emerge of something far more extraordinary: the ruins of a vast Neolithic city, dating back to approximately 2300 BCE. This city, known as Shimao, reshaped everything we thought we knew about early urbanization in China. Shimao covers an area of roughly 4 square kilometers, with structures and fortifications that indicate a society far more advanced than previously imagined for the period. Massive stone walls, some more than 40 feet thick, enclose the city, creating a formidable defensive perimeter. The layout is carefully planned, with residential zones, ceremonial spaces, and administrative areas suggesting a structured social hierarchy. For a civilization over 4,000 years old, the complexity of Shimao is remarkable. One of the most striking features of the city is a 230-foot-high pyramid, located at the heart of Shimao. This monumental structure likely served as the residence of the ruling elite, a physical manifestation of power, authority, and spiritual significance. Surrounding the pyramid are terraces, platforms, and walls, meticulously constructed from locally sourced stone, demonstrating a mastery of engineering and architectural planning that rivals civilizations that would follow centuries later. Thousands of artifacts have been recovered from the city, shedding light on its daily life, culture, and beliefs. Pottery, jade objects, and ceremonial items reveal a society with artistic sensibilities and sophisticated craftsmanship. The presence of both domestic and ritual artifacts suggests that Shimao was not only a hub of administration and defense, but also a center for religious and cultural activity. The defensive structures of Shimao are particularly noteworthy. Its stone walls and watchtowers suggest that the city faced threats, whether from rival communities, raiders, or internal unrest. The scale of construction indicates significant organization, requiring large labor forces, planning, and resources. This level of social coordination hints at a ruling class capable of directing complex projects, maintaining order, and managing the logistics of a growing urban population. Excavations also reveal evidence of stratified society. The placement of artifacts, the organization of spaces, and the monumental pyramid all point to a ruling elite overseeing the city's operations. At the same time, residential zones suggest that a substantial portion of the population engaged in agriculture, craft production, and trade. The combination of elite, administrative, and common spaces paints a picture of a structured, hierarchical society. Shimao challenges previous assumptions about the development of early Chinese civilization. Before its discovery, historians believed that urban complexity in the region emerged much later, particularly during the rise of dynastic states. Shimao demonstrates that advanced social, architectural, and defensive systems were already in place more than 4 millennia ago. Its existence pushes back the timeline of urbanization and provides crucial insights into the evolution of Chinese civilization. The city's location also reveals strategic thinking. Perched atop hills and terraces, Shimao commanded views of the surrounding landscape, controlling trade routes and agricultural lands. Its stone walls not only defended the inhabitants but also projected power, establishing the city as both a practical and symbolic center of authority. The urban planning, integration of natural terrain, and monumental architecture indicate a deep understanding of both environment and society. Artistic achievements at Shimao further reflect the sophistication of its people. Decorative carvings, jade ornaments, and intricately shaped pottery demonstrate both aesthetic appreciation and skilled craftsmanship. These objects suggest a society capable of not only meeting basic survival needs, but also engaging in cultural expression, rituals, and symbolic communication. The discovery of Shimao has revolutionized archaeology and history in China. It highlights the potential of Neolithic civilizations to develop complex urban centers with advanced planning, hierarchical governance, and artistic production. The city serves as a bridge in our understanding between early agrarian settlements and later dynastic states, providing a tangible link in the story of human social evolution. Excavation of the site continues to reveal new insights. Researchers are studying how resources were managed, how labor was organized, and how social and ceremonial spaces were structured. Shimao's walls, terraces, and pyramid offer clues to construction techniques, engineering knowledge, and the logistical capabilities of a civilization that existed thousands of years before modern technology. Shimao is also remarkable for its resilience. Despite millennia of natural erosion, earthquakes and human interference, much of the city's layout, fortifications and central structures remain discernible. The scale and sophistication of the city endure as a testament to the ingenuity, skill, and vision of its builders. The Neolithic city of Shimal is more than an archaeological site, it is a window into early urban life, an illustration of human innovation, social organization, and cultural achievement. Its stone walls, monumental pyramid, and artifacts tell a story of a people capable of remarkable feats of planning, engineering, and artistry, centuries before the rise of the dynastic states that would later define Chinese history. Shimao challenges our understanding of the past. It reminds us that human societies, even thousands of years ago, were capable of extraordinary vision, collaboration, and achievement. Through the city's ruins, the lives, ambitions, and accomplishments of a long-lost civilization endure, offering insights into the origins of urbanization, social complexity, and cultural expression in ancient China. Homo naledi, a hidden cousin in Rising Star Cave. In 2013, a team of scientists led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger entered the labyrinthine depths of Rising Star Cave in South Africa. What they found would challenge the understanding of human evolution and rewrite parts of the story of our own ancestry. Hidden in a remote chamber, deep beneath the surface, lay a remarkable collection of hominin fossils, remains untouched for hundreds of thousands of years. The chamber, difficult to access and shrouded in darkness, concealed an extraordinary secret, a hoard of bones that would reveal a previously unknown species of human relative. These fossils, dating to between 335,000 and 236,000 years ago, exhibited a fascinating combination of traits. Some were primitive, reminiscent of earlier hominins, while others displayed features strikingly similar to modern humans. This unique mix signaled a species that was both ancient and surprisingly sophisticated, occupying a place in the human family tree that no one had anticipated. Berger and his team named this species Homo naledi, in recognition of the local Rising Star Cave system where the fossils were discovered. What made the find remarkable was not only the morphology of the bones, but the implications for human evolution. Until this discovery, the prevailing assumption was that only one hominin species occupied southern Africa during this period. Homo naledi demonstrated that multiple species coexisted, overlapping in time and space with other ancient humans. The fossils included skulls, hands, feet, and long bones, each telling a story of a species both familiar and alien. The hands and feet suggested dexterity and mobility, capable of climbing yet also walking efficiently on the ground. The skulls displayed small brain sizes, comparable to earlier species, yet the structure of the teeth and other skeletal features hinted at complex behaviors. The combination of primitive and advanced traits forced scientists to reconsider assumptions about intelligence, culture, and evolutionary pathways. One of the most compelling aspects of the discovery was the deliberate placement of the remains. The fossils were concentrated in a single, difficult-to-reach chamber, deep within the cave, a location that would have required intentional navigation through narrow passages and challenging terrain. This led researchers to hypothesize that Homo naledi may have engaged in behaviors previously thought to be exclusive to modern humans. Some propose that the species deliberately placed their dead in this remote chamber, a practice that suggests social awareness, ritual behavior, or a form of early mortuary care. The discovery of Homo naledi also highlights the diversity of hominin evolution. Prior to this find, the narrative of human ancestry often emphasized a linear progression from primitive to modern forms. Naledi disrupts that narrative, revealing a species that retained ancestral traits, while potentially exhibiting behaviors associated with more advanced hominins. It is a reminder that evolution is not a straight line, but a complex branching process, where multiple species coexist, interact, and adapt in overlapping timelines. Fossil analysis shows that Homo naledi had small, elongated skulls, yet capable hands and curved fingers adapted for climbing. Their bodies were slender, their legs long, indicating efficient bipedalism. The mix of primitive and modern features suggests a species uniquely adapted to its environment, combining survival skills from earlier ancestors with anatomical traits that hint at intelligence, dexterity, and possibly culture. The implications for our understanding of human ancestry are profound. Homo naledi may have coexisted with early members of Homo sapiens, overlapping in time in southern Africa. This coexistence challenges the notion that early humans were the sole occupants of the region, and raises questions about interactions, competition, and exchange between species. The presence of a species with such a small brain size, yet potential cultural behaviors, complicates assumptions about the link between brain volume and intelligence or social complexity. The Rising Star Cave itself adds to the intrigue. Its maze of narrow passages, vertical shafts, and remote chambers created a hidden sanctuary for these ancient relatives. Accessing the site required navigating extremely confined spaces, making the original deposition of the fossils all the more mysterious. How did a species with a brain smaller than our own manage to carry out such careful placement of their dead? The question remains open, inviting speculation about the cognitive abilities and social practices of Homo naledi. Beyond its scientific significance, the discovery resonates with broader reflections on human evolution. Homo naledi represents a distant cousin, a reminder that the story of humanity is richer and more intricate than once imagined. It challenges assumptions about progress, intelligence, and adaptation, showing that multiple species, each uniquely suited to their environments, shared the stage of human history. The careful excavation and study of these fossils continues. Researchers examine bone wear patterns, skeletal proportions, and the spatial arrangement of remains to reconstruct the lives and behaviors of Homo naleo. Each piece of evidence contributes to a growing understanding of a species that was once hidden, yet remarkably connected to the story of human evolution. Homo naleo also underscores the importance of exploration and discovery. Deep in a cave system that seemed inaccessible, the past lay preserved, untouched for hundreds of thousands of years. Rising Star Cave reminds us that the history of our species and our relatives is far from fully known. Even today, surprises await those willing to look deeper, to navigate challenges, and to question assumptions about the human journey. Through Homo naledi we see the complexity of evolution, the coexistence of multiple species, and the ingenuity required to survive in diverse environments. The fossils offer a tangible connection to a distant past, a species whose lives overlapped with our ancestors yet remained hidden for millennia. The discovery reshapes the narrative of humanity, illustrating that intelligence, culture, and social behavior are not unique to our species alone. Homo naledi, emerging from the darkness of Rising Star Cave, stands as a testament to the diversity, adaptability, and mystery of the human family tree. It invites us to reconsider what it means to be human, and to reflect on the countless branches of life that have shaped the world we inhabit today.